Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ingrid Lyne. Ingrid Lyne was born on August 2, 1975. She lived in Renton, Washington, just outside Seattle, with her 3 young daughters. Ingrid was a nurse at Swedish Medical Center in Seattle. She balanced her career with taking care of her young children. After divorcing Phillip Lyne, who was also the father of her children, they agreed to share parenting responsibilities. Although divorced, Ingrid and Phillip still maintained a friendly relationship to effectively raise their daughter together. Ingrid's world revolved around her daughters, Noelle, 10, Brooke, 8, and Reese, 6. She was devoted to their safety and happiness, willing to sacrifice whatever was necessary. On April 9, 2016, Phillip Lyne visited Ingrid at their residence in Renton, Washington, in a visit intended to care for their children together. Phillip was sure that Ingrid would be home to welcome him. But when he arrived at the house, Phillip was unable to reach Ingrid by phone, so he then contacted Ingrid's mother, Yorga, for support. Yorga and Phillip entered Ingrid's house using Yorga's key and began searching for Ingrid. They found Ingrid's wallet, phone, and other personal items, including her driver's license, but no sign of Ingrid. It seemed unusual for her to leave without telling anyone. Worried, Yorga decided to report Ingrid missing to the authorities. As the investigation progressed, police spoke to Ingrid's friends and neighbors, eventually learning that she had mentioned going on a date with a man the night before. A neighbor also mentioned that Ingrid had recently started seeing a man named John, which was news to Yorga and Phillip. Ingrid and Yorga had previously shared phone accounts, allowing Yorga to access Ingrid's call logs. When reviewing the logs, Yorga discovered that Ingrid had made multiple calls to a number registered in Montana. Yorga became suspicious and looked up the phone number online and discovered it was linked to John Robert Charlton's Facebook account. Concerned for Ingrid's safety, Yorga sent a text message to the number on Saturday, saying she had contacted 911 to report her daughter missing. John Charlton replied, looking surprised and asking what was going on. He explained that he and Ingrid had attended a Mariners game the previous day but then broke up because Ingrid needed to take care of her children early the next morning. Even though Yorga was repeatedly asking him to talk to the police, John Charlton refused to stop responding. The case reached a new turning point on April 9, when a Seattle resident named Mike Novasio placed an emergency call to authorities. Mike reported that when he returned home, he noticed one of his recycling bins had an unusual weight, which had been left outside for collection on April 7. Mike had noticed something was wrong and had decided to investigate. When he had opened the trash can, he had been shocked to find 3 clear plastic bags, one of which had appeared to contain human remains, which was why he had immediately called the authorities. When the police and medical examiner had arrived, they had carefully examined the contents of the bags. Inside, they had found a human head, a foot, an arm, and a leg. Although the remains had shown no signs of decomposition, facial features had still been recognizable, allowing them to identify the remains as those of Ingrid. In the following days, more of Ingrid's remains had been found. Some had been discovered at a recycling facility, while others had been found in coolers at another location. Unfortunately, not all of Ingrid's remains had been found. During a search of Ingrid's home, police had found tickets to a Mariners game on her laptop dated April 8. It had been believed that Ingrid and John had attended the game scheduled for 7:10 p.m. on April 11. As a result, John had been arrested and taken for questioning. During interrogation, John had admitted knowing Ingrid and said they had been dating for about a month after meeting online. He had usually spent the night at her place. But on this particular night, he hadn't because her children would be home the next day. John had claimed that he had gone to a bar with Ingrid after the Mariners game and then driven back to her home in Renton in her car. He had said he had been very drunk and didn't remember much of what had happened after that. He had remembered having sex with Ingrid and her acting strangely, but his memory of the rest of that night had been unclear. When asked what he had done afterward, John had said he wasn't sure, but he had thought he might have slept on a sidewalk in downtown Seattle and woken up there the next morning. He guessed that Ingrid had dropped him off downtown before leaving. John had told authorities he was struggling with alcoholism and had no fixed residence. A physical examination had been conducted and John's injuries had been documented with photographs. He had had scratches on his left hand and forehead, cuts on his mouth and chin, and scratches on his chest. His ex-girlfriend had said she had seen him on April 9th and had noticed his lip was swollen and injured. John had explained his injuries by saying he had been robbed, but this had aroused suspicion among investigators due to John still having his wallet. Ingrid's car had been found by law enforcement in Belltown, a neighborhood near Seattle, on April 20th. However, this discovery raised a contradiction with John's original statement. John had claimed that Ingrid had dropped him off in downtown Seattle and then had driven back home, but evidence from the car had shown otherwise. Police had discovered trash bags in the car that were identical to the bags containing Ingrid's body parts. 3 fingerprints on the driver's door handle had matched John's, leading to his arrest on suspicion of having killed Ingrid and having stolen her car. John's arrest had been based largely on circumstantial evidence. Despite this, he had pleaded not guilty, and his defense team had argued that there had been no direct physical evidence linking him to Ingrid's murder. Initially denying involvement, John had eventually changed his plea to guilty before the trial had begun. During court proceedings, the prosecution had alleged that John had strangled Ingrid at her home and then had used a pruning saw to dismember her body in the bathtub. John had allegedly dumped Ingrid's body in multiple locations in Seattle. At her residence, police had found a nearly empty package of plastic bags identical to those containing her body. In the bathroom, authorities had discovered a 15-inch pruning saw, suspected to have been the tool used to dismember her body. They had also found human remains underneath the bathtub during their investigation. John had been sentenced to just over 27 years in prison, the maximum sentence allowed under state sentencing discretion. However, Judge Julie Spector had wanted to impose a life sentence because John's actions had been too serious. When given the opportunity to speak, John had apologized to the court and Ingrid's family, and had said that he truly regretted his evil and cruel behavior. John had had a long history of run-ins with the law, including convictions for serious crimes such as aggravated robbery, felony theft, and assault. He had also been arrested for theft. However, it had been his behavior at home that had worried his parents the most. In 2006, John's parents had felt threatened by their son's actions and had obtained a temporary protective order against him. According to court records, John had been struggling with the pressures of life and had been experiencing psychological instability. On March 2, 2006, he had been drunk and aggressive, trying to fight with his parents at his home. His behavior, not only in words but also in actions, had posed a threat to their safety. John's parents had been concerned about his possible cocaine use and his tendency to hold grudges for years. They had also noticed that when he had been drunk or on drugs, he had become scary, making them fear for their safety. One incident that stands out is when John had forced his mother to watch the movie Hannibal and had warned her to watch this and be careful. This behavior had been disturbing and had added to their concerns. Despite initial concerns, John's parents had eventually asked that the protective order be withdrawn. Following Ingrid's murder, the grief experienced by her family and friends had been immense, reflecting the loss of a caring mother, daughter, and friend. In the wake of Ingrid's tragic death, the community had come together to support her family, demonstrating strength through adversity. Ingrid's memory would continue to live on in the hearts of those who had known and loved her. Her story served as a reminder to prioritize safety and caution when meeting people online. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Wilma Anderson. Wilma Anderson is the daughter of Linda and Marcus Anderson. Her parents' divorce later left difficulties in the family, making Wilma's living situation unstable. Although she could not live with both parents, her mother was always interested in her life. Wilma lived with her older sister Emily. Wilma is an active and ambitious girl. She likes to share her life on social networks, often posting photos on Facebook. Wilma loves being in front of the camera, showing her creativity and cheerful personality. Wilma met Tishko Ahmed Shabazz in Sweden when she was 15 years old. At that time, Tishko was 20 years old. Because the age of sexual consent in Sweden is 15, their relationship did not cause any legal problems. Although initially apprehensive about the 5-year age gap, Wilma's mother trusted her daughter's decision and eventually accepted Tishko. Tishko was originally from Iraq but moved to Sweden with his family when he was 8 years old. Tishko lived with his father and stepmother. During his school years, Tishko faced bullying, but as he grew older, he developed a strong determination to overcome any challenges he faced. In 2014, Tishko became a Swedish citizen, and after completing his studies in 2018, Tishko found a job in the care industry. Wilma and Tishko moved in together in Uddevalla, Sweden. Over time, Tishko became increasingly controlling, and Wilma's mother noticed a change in her daughter's behavior during the 2 years Wilma lived with Tishko. Wilma often confided in her sister Emily about her difficult relationship with Tishko. On November 14, 2019, Wilma told Emily over the phone that she was ending her relationship with Tishko. She was exhausted by Tishko's control over every aspect of her life, including what she wore, where she went, who she talked to, and how she applied her makeup. Feeling suffocated and desperate to end the relationship, she said she had to pack up and leave before Tishko got home from work. Emily tried to contact Wilma, but her calls went unanswered. The next day, November 15th, Wilma missed her dentist appointment. 2 days later, November 17th, Wilma's parents came to the apartment she shared with Tishko. After several knocks, Tishko opened the door, apparently intoxicated. Wilma's mother, Linda, asked Tishko about Wilma's whereabouts. He admitted that their relationship was over and that Wilma had left after taking her things. Tishko claimed that he did not know where Wilma was. Wilma's parents entered the apartment, hoping to find out more. Tishko recounted the argument that led to the breakup, with him and Wilma having a heated argument when he returned home from work around 5:30 p.m. Initially, her parents were not too concerned, as Tishko and Wilma's relationship was unstable. Emily, extremely concerned about Wilma's disappearance, created a Facebook post seeking information about Wilma. Normally, Wilma always contacted her family, so the lack of contact was very unusual. In the post, Emily described Wilma's appearance as 165 centimeters tall with black hair. After the posts were posted on social media, the police got involved. They interviewed Emily and other family members and began searching for anyone who may have come into contact with Wilma. However, neither Linda nor Emily had heard from her since her disappearance. With an extensive search effort underway, a combined task force of police, friends, and family set out to track Wilma using dogs and drone technology. When police approached Tishko for questioning, he claimed to have no knowledge of Wilma's disappearance or whereabouts, confirming that he had had no recent contact with her. By November 17th, 3 days into the search for Wilma, there were still no leads. Wilma was normally active on social media, but she had been strangely quiet during the time she was missing. As a result, some 5,000 people joined the search effort, and police returned to Tishko to gather more information. However, Tishko insisted that he knew nothing about Wilma's disappearance. Tishko claimed that Wilma had moved on to another man after they broke up, but there was no evidence to support this claim. Wilma's friends and family were left deeply concerned about her disappearance. Meanwhile, Wilma's family shared disturbing details with police about how Wilma's life had changed for the worse since living with Tishko. According to Wilma's family, Tishko controlled Wilma's life. Her sister, Emily, revealed that Wilma confessed that she was abused while living with Tishko. But despite this abuse, Wilma still had strong feelings for Tishko. Tishko took extreme measures to monitor Wilma's activities, including installing a GPS device on her phone. This allowed him to constantly track her location. A series of text messages between the two revealed Tishko's controlling behavior. The police thoroughly investigated Tishko's alibi. He claimed that after arriving home from work at 5 p.m., he did not leave his apartment. To verify Tishko's story, police tracked the GPS on Tishko's phone. Police found CCTV footage showing Tishko at a supermarket around 2:30 p.m. on the day Wilma went missing. He then returned home from work at 5 p.m. Neighbors reported a loud argument between Tishko and Wilma, and arguments were common between them. A loud argument between the Wilma and Tishko occurred around 6 p.m. This prompted a concerned neighbor to check on them. As the neighbor approached the apartment door, they noticed an eerie silence. The sudden quiet was unsettling, but the neighbor, unsure of what to do next, returned to their own apartment. The police thoroughly investigated Tishko's activities, including his workplace and company vehicle. They requested forensic testing on the vehicle and reviewed the GPS data, which revealed his movements from Thursday the 14th to Monday the 18th. According to the GPS log, Tishko had visited clients and returned to his residence during his regular work hours on those days. On the evening of the argument, around 6:30 p.m., Tishko left his apartment. Witnesses saw him walking alone along the freeway, wearing all black clothing. A motorcyclist described Tishko as appearing lost in thought. Police stopped Tishko and escorted him home. When questioned, Tishko said he initially intended to catch a train but decided to walk home instead. However, the police did not file an official report on the incident. Later, on November 19, 2019, Tishko was arrested. He had obvious scratches on his wrists. A search of Tishko's apartment revealed clues such as Wilma's belongings, including a handbag, jacket, shoes, and eyeglasses. Wilma's mother, Linda, insisted that her daughter would always carry her bag, adding to the mystery. Forensic experts tested the scene with Blue Star, a sophisticated version of luminol, and found a trail of blood. Every room had blood on the walls and floors, suggesting a violent struggle had taken place throughout the apartment. The bed had a gruesome stain, a torso-shaped mark that was visible under the glow of Blue Star. The discovery of muscle tissue on a knife and on the living room wall added to the horrific scene. The large amount of blood found made it seem unlikely that anyone could have survived. The search continued outside the apartment, where trash bags were found containing Tishko's bedding with incriminating blood stains. Confronted at the police station, Tishko was shown the evidence against him. However, he strongly denied any involvement, claiming he would have known if someone had been seriously hurt in his home. At the same time, more and more people were joining the search for Wilma every day. The apartment where Wilma was last seen has now been turned into a crime scene, but all attempts to contact Wilma have been unsuccessful. 2 weeks after Wilma went missing, on November 28, police brought in sniffer dogs to assist in the search. These trained dogs are experts at detecting the scent of dead bodies. When they entered the bedroom, one of the dogs quickly indicated that it had found something, a sign that there was likely a dead person or human remains in the area. A strong, unpleasant stench filled the apartment, making the already gloomy atmosphere even more oppressive. The police had searched the place before, but this time they carefully searched the bedroom, paying special attention to the area the dogs had marked. They focused on a wardrobe, which at first glance looked like another piece of furniture. However, inside this ordinary-looking wardrobe was a small travel suitcase. When they opened the suitcase, the police found a large object wrapped in aluminum kitchen foil. When they carefully removed the foil, they witnessed a horrifying sight with blood stains on the foil. Wilma's head had been severed, wrapped, and secured with tape. The travel case, which held the gruesome evidence of Wilma's fate, was sent to the forensic labs in Gothenburg for further analysis. A detailed examination uncovered Tishko's fingerprints. The investigation revealed the shocking conclusion of the case. Although the exact cause of Wilma's death could not be confirmed, investigators found severe injuries to her head and eyes consistent with blunt force trauma. The violent nature of the decapitation made it difficult to assess the full extent of Wilma's head injuries. Wilma's family was devastated by the news of Wilma's tragic fate. Wilma's mother Linda joined the efforts to find the rest of Wilma's body. The family was forced to confront the horrific details of the crime, which were slowly emerging from the evidence found in Tishko's apartment. A harrowing picture began to emerge. Wilma's final moments may have taken place in the living room, where she was brutally attacked, suffering a fatal blow to the head. Swedish police recorded Tishko's denial of involvement in Wilma's murder, in which he maintained his innocence. His statement revealed a distorted perception of love, as he said, "You forget that this is a girl he loved and that he lived his whole life for. If he killed her, he wouldn't be able to keep her head." Despite this, law enforcement gathered enough evidence to charge Tishko, and his trial was scheduled for May 2020. Throughout the trial, Wilma's body remained missing. Tishko showed no signs of remorse or emotion. In court, his defense team tried to argue that he was not guilty by reason of insanity, pointing to his irrational beliefs and claims about Wilma as evidence. However, this defense was unsuccessful. On July 27, 2020, the court delivered its verdict. Tishko, 23, was found guilty of murdering 17-year-old Wilma Anderson and was initially sentenced to life in prison. However, the appeals court later reduced his sentence to 18 years. The sentence was reduced in part due to a lack of concrete evidence surrounding the circumstances of Wilma's death, including the fact that her body was never found. Wilma's funeral was finally held in late 2020, bringing closure to the tragic events, but undoubtedly causing immense grief for her family. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Neil Entwistle. Neil Entwistle was born on September 18, 1978, in Worksop, Nottinghamshire, England, to Clifford and Yvonne Entwistle. He grew up in a humble home with his younger brother, Russell. His father worked as a coal miner before becoming a labor counselor, while his mother worked as a cook in a school cafeteria. After finishing high school, Neil Entwistle enrolled in the University of York, where he studied electronic engineering and business management. During this time, Entwistle met an American student named Rachel Souza who was attending York as a study abroad student. Rachel was originally from the Kingston area in Massachusetts, had attended Silver Lake Region High School before going to Holy Cross College in Worcester. While studying abroad in York for a year, she met Neil Entwistle on the rowing team. Neil Entwistle was withdrawn, shy, and indecisive, rarely interacting with others. Rachel, on the other hand, exuded confidence, was cheerful, outgoing, and well-liked. Her American roots brought an undeniable charm to her personality, and Rachel was well received by the other members of the rowing team. Over time, Neil Entwistle and Rachel found themselves drawn to each other, eventually spending more and more time together. Benjamin Pryor, a close friend of Neil Entwistle and Rachel's since college, said the couple were very understanding, affectionate and caring towards each other. While Neil Entwistle worked at a defense and security technology company based in Malvern, Worcestershire, Rachel pursued a career in education after completing her studies in 2002. Rachel took up a teaching role in English, drama and theater studies at St. Augustine's Catholic High School in Redditch, nurturing young minds through the arts. In a post on Friends Reunited in June 2003, Neil Entwistle happily shared about his upcoming marriage to Rachel. They met through rowing, although he expressed dissatisfaction with life south of the border in Birmingham. He was happy with his upcoming marriage. In August 2003, Neil Entwistle and Rachel got married in 2 ceremonies, one in Plymouth, UK, and the other in Massachusetts, USA. After the US ceremony, they had a reception in the UK in November of the same year. Neil Entwistle shared the early days of their married life on a family website, including their Christmas 2004 trip to the Mediterranean. In April 2005, their daughter, Lillian Rose, was born. Neil Entwistle and Rachel decided to move to the United States. They initially lived with Rachel's mother and stepfather in Carver, Massachusetts, until they purchased their own home in Hopkinton on January 12, 2006. Their new home was located on a quiet cul-de-sac with only 8 neighbors, creating a peaceful setting close to a major city. Despite Neil Entwistle's efforts to find work as a computer programmer and IT specialist, he encountered difficulties in finding work, leading to financial stress and mounting debt. To ease the financial burden, Neil Entwistle turned to selling PC parts on eBay. However, his business was affected by customer complaints about undelivered orders, forcing eBay to investigate fraud. An investigation into Neil Entwistle's eBay activities uncovered that he was using multiple accounts under different names. Further investigation revealed that Neil Entwistle was involved in running a website called millimaker.co.uk. This website promoted a get-rich-quick scheme that promised to help people in the adult entertainment industry make a guaranteed $6,000 per month within 6 months. The website also claimed to offer 24/7 assistance. However, these claims ultimately led to the website being shut down. Neil Entwistle used online platforms to find sexual partners. He visited several websites to pursue relationships looking for sexual partners. On Adult Friend Finder, Neil Entwistle created a profile and emailed several women expressing his interest in meeting sexual partners. An investigation found incriminating evidence on Neil Entwistle's laptop. In his profile, Neil Entwistle stated that he was interested in meeting American women of different ages. Neil Entwistle also mentioned that he wanted to confirm whether American women were better in bed than women from other countries. Neil Entwistle's profile indicated that he was looking for a specific type of casual relationship and was open to meeting people with similar interests. Testimony at the trial revealed Neil Entwistle had continued his interest in escort services up to January 18, 2006. Online searches he conducted on Google included Blonde Bay Escort Service, Sex Escort Services Westborough, and Escort in Worcester. In their defense, Neil Entwistle's lawyers claimed that his wife, Rachel, was dissatisfied with their sex life. However, when reviewing Neil Entwistle's internet search history, it is revealed that Neil Entwistle had much darker motives than seeking out prostitutes and seeking relationships with other women. During this time, Neil Entwistle visited his father-in-law, Joe Matarazzo, in Carver, Massachusetts. Joe Matarazzo, a member of the Old Colony Sporting Club, had previously taught Neil Entwistle how to shoot. Neil Entwistle also had a .22 caliber revolver with Joe Matarazzo's family. However, on this occasion, Neil Entwistle planned to steal a gun from Joe Matarazzo's family. Neil Entwistle went to his in-laws' home, found a hidden gun, and took it back to his house in Hopkinton. Once home, he secretly hid the firearm, waiting for the right moment to carry out a violent act against his family. On January 20, 2006, Neil Entwistle entered the master bedroom of his home, where his wife, Rachel, and their 9-month-old daughter, Lillian, were sleeping in their new bed. Neil Entwistle shot Rachel in the head and then shot Lillian, who was lying next to her. The bullet passed through Lillian's body and also hit Rachel in the left chest. Later that day, Neil Entwistle returned to Carver with the uncleaned weapon. He would later claim that he had gone shopping at Staples on that Friday and discovered his family dead when he got home. After leaving Carver, Neil Entwistle drove to Boston's Logan Airport on the evening of January 20, 2006. At the airport, he made 2 successful ATM withdrawals totaling $800, but 3 additional attempts to withdraw $420 were declined. The next day, January 21, 2006, Neil Entwistle bought a one-way ticket to London without checking any luggage. He boarded a British Airways flight that departed Boston at 8:15 p.m. that evening. Unbeknownst to Neil Entwistle, several neighbors he had invited for dinner, including Joanna Gatley and her sister Maureen, arrived at his home around 7 p.m. to find it locked with the lights on inside. Concerned for Rachel's safety, neighbors attempted to contact her mother, but were unable to reach her. They then called 911 at around 8:30. Police arrived at Neil Entwistle's home to search for clues about the missing family. Upon entering, Sergeant Michael Sutton observed the bedroom, noticing a large unmade bed, but nothing unusual. After completing their search, the police locked the house and left. However, Joanna Gatley and Maureen were still worried and decided to spend the night in the car outside the house, hoping that Rachel's family would return. To cope with the cold weather, they made several trips to the gas station restroom. The following Sunday morning, Joanna Gatley and Maureen gained entry to the house using the garage door code they had obtained from a next-door neighbor the night before. Inside, Joanna Gatley and Maureen discovered dishes and leftover food in the kitchen, indicating that the family had just finished eating. The bathtub was still full of water, indicating that the couple had bathed their infant daughter. They proceeded to the master bedroom, then to Lillian's bathroom, where classical music was playing, and finally checked the living room. Rachel's mother and stepfather then arrived at Rachel's house, and together they searched around the house. After assessing the situation, they decided to report the family missing to the Hopkinton Police Department. The police arrived at Rachel's house. Sergeant Sutton entered the basement and detected a foul odor. He followed the stench into the house to the master bedroom, where he found the bodies of Rachel and her infant child, Lillian. The mother's body was lying on a bed, covered in clothes. Rachel had her arms spread across Lillian's chest, both of them wearing pajamas. Autopsy results showed that Rachel died from a gunshot wound to the head, while Lillian was shot in the torso. DNA evidence was also found on the barrel of the gun and on the butt of the gun, belonging to Neil Entwistle. About 36 hours after returning to England, Neil Entwistle visited his parents, Cliff and Yvonne. He told them that he had been driving around and had spent the previous night in a hotel. During this visit, Neil Entwistle revealed to his parents that he had discovered the bodies of his wife and daughter. On January 23, 2006, Neil Entwistle had a 2-hour telephone conversation with Hopkinton Police, which was recorded. On January 26, 2006, U.S. law enforcement officials traveled to the UK to interview Neil Entwistle. The next day, after consulting with a lawyer at the U.S. Embassy in London, Neil Entwistle chose not to cooperate with the American detectives. Meanwhile, Rachel and her daughter Lillian were buried in Evergreen Cemetery in Kingston, Massachusetts, under the surname Souza, sharing a single grave, with around 500 people attending the funeral to pay their respects. However, Neil Entwistle was absent from the ceremony, and Neil Entwistle's name was not mentioned in the proceedings or inscribed on the headstone. Despite this, Neil Entwistle sent a bouquet of flowers, consisting of an orange rose and a white lily, with a note that read, "My orange roses and lilies forever," signed Sakoko. After returning to the UK, Neil Entwistle resumed his normal life in February 2006. However, the media continued to gather outside his parents' home in Worksop. Neil Entwistle went to Notting Hill for dinner with his old crew from York University. followed by a trip to the cinema. Just a week after the funeral, on February 8, 2006, the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office issued an arrest warrant for Neil Entwistle. The following day, February 9, 2006, Neil Entwistle was arrested by police at Royal Oak Station as he was about to board a train. Neil Entwistle was returned to the United States on February 15 and appeared in court, where he was denied bail and held at the Middlesex County Jail in Cambridge, Massachusetts. On March 28, 2006, Neil Entwistle was formally charged with murder and illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. Neil Entwistle pleaded not guilty despite the charges against him. Almost a year after the incident, in December 2006, authorities at Middlesex County Jail found letters Neil Entwistle had written to his parents and lawyers. These letters showed that Neil Entwistle was depressed and might be thinking about killing himself. As a result, he was moved to Bridgewater Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation before being sent back to Middlesex County. Forensic psychiatrist Christopher Cordes believed that Neil Entwistle's behavior was caused by Asperger's syndrome, a view that was shared by Dr. David Holmes. After several delays, the process of choosing jurors for Neil Entwistle's trial at Middlesex Superior Court began in June 2008. The trial for the double murder of Neil Entwistle's wife and daughter began on June 2, 2008, in Renton, Massachusetts. Elliot Weinstein led the defense team for Neil Entwistle. During the trial, Elliot attempted to object to the prosecution's plan to introduce DNA evidence, but was unsuccessful. Elliot also attempted to suppress other evidence found in the family home, arguing that it was taken without a warrant, but this effort was also unsuccessful. Neil Entwistle chose not to call any witnesses or testify during the trial. Notably, Neil Entwistle showed little emotion throughout the proceedings. On June 25, 2008, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Neil Entwistle of 2 counts of first-degree murder, as well as unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition. As a result, Neil Entwistle was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite the severe sentence, Neil Entwistle appeared calm as he left the courtroom. Neil Entwistle was incarcerated at the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center. In August 2008, he became the victim of a hoax when he shaved his head to seek protection from a white supremacist prison gang. However, instead of receiving protection, the gang threatened Neil Entwistle's life. After this incident, Neil Entwistle was placed in protective custody. He was then transferred to the Old Colony Correctional Center, a prison located in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, in December. The tragic death of Rachel and her infant daughter has left a lasting legacy of grief for the family and those who loved them. In the face of this tragic loss, the community has come together to support and comfort the grieving family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Bobby Ann McLeod. 18-year-old Bobby Ann McLeod lived with her parents, Donna and Adrian, and her brother Lee, in Plymouth, a lively coastal town in southwest England, known for its rich history and maritime heritage. On November 20th, 2021, at around 5:45 p.m., Bobby Ann told her father she loved him and was going downtown to meet her boyfriend and friends. She left their home in the area of Lytham and walked to the nearest bus stop on Sheep Store Road, a route she knew well. However, hours later, her family realized she had vanished. They contacted the police, and a massive search began the next day, which ultimately led to a gruesome discovery. When it had been an hour and a half since Bobby Ann had left the house, her mother, Donna, texted her, asking if she was okay and if she had gotten to where she had planned to go. Without an answer, a worried Donna tried to call her daughter, but Bobby Ann wasn't answering her phone either, and that wasn't usual at all. It was another hour or so before Bobby Ann's boyfriend called her parents and asked if their daughter was home. He was worried because Bobby Ann hadn't shown up for their date. and all his attempts to contact her by phone had been unsuccessful. After exhausting all possible leads by contacting their daughter's friends, Bobby Ann's parents came to a disturbing realization. No one had any idea where she might be. This led them to fear the worst and prompted them to report her missing to the police. The police conducted an extensive search of the area on November 21st, with assistance from McLeod's family and volunteers. To raise awareness, flyers bearing Bobby Ann's photo were distributed throughout the city, and her disappearance was publicized through social media and local news outlets. Police were aware that Bobby Ann was scheduled to take a bus downtown, so they quickly investigated and discovered that she hadn't boarded any bus. While questioning people in the area, the officers spoke with a local resident who claimed to have driven past the bus stop the previous evening and seen Bobby Ann waiting there. This suggested that she had made it to the bus stop but didn't get on the bus for some unknown reason. The local resident's account was soon confirmed when the police found Bobby Ann's wireless headphones in the walkway behind the bus stop. The bus stop area was sealed off, and police officers thoroughly searched the entire surrounding area on their hands and knees for any possible clues. They also searched for evidence along the route Bobby Ann would have taken from her home to the bus stop, as well as all nearby streets. Given that Bobby Ann was at the bus stop yet failed to board the bus, and her headphones were discovered nearby, along with several undisclosed details, the authorities started to suspect that she might have been kidnapped. They urged anyone with useful information to come forward and aid the investigation. A massive search operation was launched, involving a large number of officers who worked tirelessly to locate Bobby Ann as soon as possible. The investigators tried to track the location of her cell phone, which showed that it was still within the city limits, although they were unable to pinpoint the exact location. All calls made to Bobby Ann's number were directly sent to voicemail, and ultimately, the police managed to recover her phone on the same day. The bus driver on the route where Bobby Ann vanished from the bus stop handed over the phone and AirPods case to the police. A local resident had discovered these items at the bus stop the previous evening at 7:15 p.m. When the 7:23 p.m. bus arrived, the resident handed them to the driver, thinking the owner would come looking for them. After learning the next day that Bobby Ann was missing and had last been seen at the bus stop, the driver contacted the police and turned over the phone and AirPods case. On November 22nd, the day after Bobby Ann went missing, the police, her family, and volunteers thoroughly searched the fields, woodlands, and roads around her home, but unfortunately, they found no leads. The following evening, November 23rd, the police announced that a woman's body had been discovered at Bovisan Beach, roughly 8 miles from the bus stop where Bobby Ann was last seen. The body was found in a wooded area about half a mile inland from the shore. The subsequent identification process brought devastating news to the McLeod family. The body belonged to Bobby Ann. Her death sent shockwaves of grief through her family and friends. In the aftermath, the family expressed gratitude to all who attended the vigil held in Bobby Ann's memory near the bus stop where she was last seen. At the vigil, a tearful Donna McLeod, Bobby Ann's mother, paid heartfelt tribute to her daughter and thanked friends, family, and the wider community for their overwhelming support. On November 23rd, a 24-year-old man, Cody Ackland, walked into the downtown police station and confessed to kidnapping and murdering Bobby Ann, providing specific details about the crime. Ackland, the son of a former military man, had been living with his mother since his parents divorced. Following his confession, he was arrested as a suspect, and his lawyer released a statement in which Ackland took full responsibility for Bobby Ann's death, confirming that he was the one who abducted her from the bus stop. Investigators found 3,216 disturbing and dark images on Ackland's phone, similar to those seen in horror films. In the days leading up to Bobby Ann's death, Ackland researched serial killers online, including Joseph D'Angelo Jr., Andre Chikatilo, Ivan Milat, Fred West, and Tommy Sells. However, he focused most on Ted Bundy, who is estimated to have killed at least 30 people. On the day Bobby Ann was abducted, Ackland visited an online sports store, browsing baseball bats, ski masks, and waterproof clothing. Notably, despite his secretive interests, Cody Ackland had no prior record with the police and had never been in trouble with the law. It appears he took his secret hobby to the extreme, ultimately committing a serious crime. Bobby Ann arrived at the bus stop around 6:15 p.m. At that time, Ackland was driving his Ford Fiesta around the neighborhood and noticed her waiting at the stop. He claimed that Bobby Ann physically resembled his ex-girlfriend, but according to Ackland, this similarity was not what drove him to attack her. Rather, he was seeking a random victim to fulfill his long-standing plans. Upon spotting Bobby Ann, Ackland parked his car behind the bus stop, observing her for a few minutes to ensure they were alone. He then retrieved a pre-purchased hammer, snuck up to her, and struck her twice in the head. Believing she was dead, Ackland returned to his car, preparing to leave the scene. However, as he drove away, he saw Bobby Ann was still alive and attempting to get up. Ackland turned back, moved her semi-conscious body into his car, and drove her 20 miles to the Belvoir Forest parking lot in Dartmoor. At the parking lot, Ackland discovered that Bobby Ann was still alive and conscious. However, he callously failed to seek help or take her to the hospital. Instead, he brutally struck her 12 times on the head with a claw hammer in a futile attempt to destroy evidence. Ackland then burned her purse, still trying to conceal his crime. Ackland then callously loaded the body into the trunk of his car and drove nearly 30 miles to Bovesund, where he hid the body. The next day, Ackland drove to Tamerton Foley, north of Plymouth, and discarded the hammer into the River Tamar. He also threw away a carrier bag containing his and her blood-stained clothing into nearby allotments in Coombe Lane. Despite a thorough police search, the hammer was never recovered. On November 21st, Cody Ackland spent the day socializing with friends at a pizza place, attending his band's rehearsal, and hanging out at the pub until late at night. Those who saw him that day noticed he was in an unusually good mood, happy, joking, and even hugging his friends, which was uncharacteristic of him. The following day, November 22nd, Ackland continued to enjoy himself, buying popcorn and going to the movie theater while the police and volunteers searched for Bobby Ann. He also kept up with the latest news on his phone. On November 23rd, Ackland went to his job at a car service company, but took time off for his lunch break. He texted his mother, telling her how much he loved her. Afterwards, he went to the police station and confessed to the crime. Ackland's bandmates have issued a statement on Facebook announcing that the group Rakuta will disband immediately out of respect for the late Bobby Ann McLeod. Remaining members Josh Ross, Josh, and Mike are shocked and disbelieving about the tragic events of the past few days. Their thoughts and prayers are with Bobby Ann's family and friends who must be devastated by their loss. As a mark of respect, they have decided not to continue as a band. In addition to Ackland's confession, the police had significant physical evidence, including Bobby Ann's DNA found in Ackland's car and on sneakers recovered from his home. Detective Mike West, who led the investigation, reported that Ackland refused to provide a motive for the killing and avoided discussing why he did it. However, the detective did not rule out the possibility that Ackland might eventually provide more details about his actions in the future. Ackland told a psychiatrist that the depression he had experienced before killing Miss McLeod had lifted, and he no longer felt the same level of resentment as before, as if the violent act had somehow resolved those feelings. The trial took place in May 2022. Ackland's lawyer, Ray Tully, stated that psychiatrists concluded Ackland did not have a mental illness, but had faced difficulties in his childhood. Ackland had been diagnosed with ADHD, dyslexia, depression, and anxiety, and had experienced depression for 7 years by the age of 19. According to Mr. Tully, Ackland had received little comfort or support from his home or school life, and his father and other male role models had not provided much in the way of guidance or support. On sentencing, judge condemned Ackland's brutal act, declaring that he was convinced by the evidence that Ackland had deliberately set out to kill. The judge described the victim's experience as a prolonged and terrible ordeal, emphasizing that she had her whole life ahead of her until Ackland brutally ended it. He stated unequivocally that Ackland had planned and carried out the murder. Cody Ackland, age 24, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 31 years before he can apply for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Alice Adams and Tibor Vass. Tibor was born and raised in Budapest, Hungary, as the second child to his parents and had a younger sister. He had a strong affinity for socializing and was musically inclined, able to play almost any instrument, with the piano being his favorite. He taught his sister Isabella how to play the piano, and they would often sing and play together while their parents listened in. After the sudden loss of his father in 2007, Tibor, his sister Isabella, and their mother Rosalia struggled to cope. Tibor spent most of his free time with his sister and began working full-time at the age of 15 in 2008. He applied to the University of Budapest, hoping that obtaining a college degree would lead to a decent job and better financial support for his mother. Despite his exceptional talent, he was denied admission to the university. This led Tibor to discuss moving to Great Britain with his mother, who seemingly supported the idea. Tibor subsequently moved to the United Kingdom in July 2010, at the age of 19. He settled in London and began working at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel. Tibor thoroughly enjoyed his job, his responsibilities, his co-workers, and the new clients he met daily. Alice was a talented musician who quickly formed a strong bond with Tibor, as they always found something to discuss. Alice Adams and Tibor Vass worked as receptionists at the hotel, alongside Attila, a 31-year-old who had been employed there the longest and had been recognized as the best employee of 2010. Like Tibor, Attila was from Hungary, which had brought them closer together. The hotel provided apartments for its incoming employees, and Attila and Tibor took advantage of this convenient arrangement, living in a house behind the hotel. This saved them money and reduced their commute time. Although Tibor was happy to be in England, he didn't give up on his plans for higher education. He reapplied to the university in Budapest and was finally accepted. Overjoyed, he was set to return to Hungary in August 2011. To mark Tibor's departure, the hotel employees organized a small farewell party on August 9, 2011. The gathering was attended by Tibor, Attila, Alice, and other hotel staff. The next day, the trio was scheduled to work, but all three failed to show up. When they didn't arrive by 7 a.m., their colleagues became concerned and alerted the authorities. The police were notified at 7:53 a.m. Upon arriving at the house, the officers found the door unlocked, but there was no response when they knocked. When one of the officers entered, he was met with a disturbing scene. Alice lay on the living room floor, her face concealed by a pillow. A subsequent autopsy revealed 22 stab wounds on her body. In the bedroom, Tibor's naked body lay on the bed, having succumbed to 2 stab wounds to the heart. Attila, however, was nowhere to be found. The police cordoned off the house, and investigators and forensic experts launched their investigation. As they examined the crime scene, they noticed that the bed where Tibor's body lay was not where he had died. The bed was too clean, suggesting that the perpetrator had inflicted Tibor's fatal wounds elsewhere, then stripped him, cleaned him up, and placed him on the bed. The apartment yielded evidence of a party, including alcohol bottles and illegal substances. Despite a thorough search of the house, surrounding area, and attic, police were unable to find Attila Ban, but they did find his personal belongings, including his papers, still in the apartment. Attila became the prime suspect, and as experts continued to process the crime scene, investigators began interviewing his co-workers. They learned that Attila had taken Tibor under his wing as soon as Tibor started working at the hotel, given their shared nationality. Attila soon invited Tibor to move in with him in an apartment near the hotel, and even adjusted their work schedules so they would be on the same shift. Tibor, a young and attractive man, had plenty of female admirers. However, Attila Bahn, who openly identified as gay, had developed romantic feelings for Tibor. According to hotel staff, Tibor consistently rebuffed Attila's advances, leaving Attila unhappy. 3 weeks prior to her murder, Alice started working at the hotel, and Tibor began to show interest in her. This naturally upset Attila, who was jealous despite knowing that Tibor only dated women. The investigators wondered, could Attila's jealousy and unrequited love have driven him to commit the crime? Even before the police discovered the bodies of Tibor Voss and Alice Adams, Attila Bahn had posted an ominous message on his Facebook page. The message, "I would like to wake up from that nightmare," was posted at 6:23 a.m., prompting concerned comments from friends that went unanswered. This message further implicated Attila Bahn in the murders of his colleagues. The brutality of the crime scene also pointed to Attila's involvement. Alice suffered 22 stab wounds, while Tibor was stabbed twice. Additionally, Alice was found lying on the floor with a pillow over her face, while Tibor's body was on the bed. The investigators spoke with the other party members, who revealed that when everyone else departed, Attila, Tibor, and Alice were the only ones remaining in the apartment. This suggested that a significant event had occurred involving these three individuals in the time leading up to dawn. The news of Tibor and Alice's deaths was devastating to both the Adams and Voss families. In a statement, Alice's mother, Sarah, paid tribute to her daughter, saying, "Her loss is a tragedy beyond expression." Alice's mother told the investigators that Alice had sent a text message around midnight, saying she would be staying overnight at a friend's house. The police then issued an all-points bulletin for Attila, but he appeared to have vanished without leaving any clues. They tried to track his phone and found that it was connected to cell towers near the hotel, which was strange. It was later discovered that Attila had been much closer to them than anyone had suspected the whole time. The investigation team spent 2 days at the scene before leaving the house. A few hours later, the forensic team returned to the house to conduct further tests. Upon arrival, they noticed that the door they had left open was now locked from the inside. When they entered the room, they found Attila lying on the bed, intoxicated and having attempted to harm himself with scissors and a knife. He had visible wounds on his neck and wrists. When questioned, Attila behaved strangely, using gestures to try to convey something. He was taken to the hospital, where doctors ensured that his life was not in danger. The police were baffled by Attila's whereabouts during the past 2 days, only to discover that he had been hiding in the sofa bed where Tibor Voss's body was found. Attila had created a slit in the base of the sofa, taken a phone and several bottles of water, and climbed inside while the police were investigating the scene. From his hiding spot, he was able to listen and watch the police through the holes he had made. Attila was eventually arrested at the hospital and became the prime suspect. The trial began on July 9, 2012, and as it progressed, more details about the brutal crime emerged. It was revealed that the party had spiraled out of control after Alice, Tibor, and Attila were left alone in the apartment. During the trial, it was established that there was sexual activity between all three, as evidenced by DNA from both men found on Miss Adams' breasts. Attila claimed to remember the three of them being in bed together, but he had no recollection of what happened afterwards. He claimed that he didn't realize the gravity of his actions until the next morning, when he woke up to find Alice and Tibor's lifeless bodies. Overcome with guilt, he wanted to take his own life, but he was too afraid to do it alone. Instead, he cut off Tibor's clothes and climbed into the bathtub with him, unable to bring himself to harm himself. He later moved Tibor's body to the bed and, aware that people would be looking for them, hid inside the base of the bed. While in hiding, he even managed to update his Facebook page. The defendant broke down in tears in the courtroom as prosecutor Richard Whittam presented the facts of the case to the jury. Tibor Vass had previously been in relationships with women who worked at the hotel, and there is no evidence to suggest he had a romantic relationship with Attila. However, Attila seemed to have strong feelings for Tibor and had exhibited possessive behavior towards him. The court was told that Attila was jealous of Vass and, just days before the crime, had thrown a tantrum during a team-building exercise when he wasn't included in a photo with his victim. The situation escalated to a critical point when Attila discovered that Tibor Vass had been accepted into a university program in Hungary and was planning to leave Britain by the end of the month. This news might have been the trigger that pushed Attila over the edge, as he couldn't bear the sight of Tibor and Alice kissing, and in a fit of jealousy, he killed them both. Prosecutor Richard Whittam revealed in his court statement that Attila was found naked on the single bed, with wounds on his wrists, forearm, and neck. It became clear that he had been hiding in the base of the double bed's divan, and he must have remained there undetected throughout the pathologist's examination, the removal of the bodies, and the crime scene investigation by forensic experts. Despite being in a state of turmoil, Attila had the presence of mind to conceal himself effectively and avoid detection during the entire time the authorities were present at the scene. After the case, Detective Inspector John Finch addressed the media outside the courtroom, defending the police's decision not to search under the bed. "I have reviewed this case multiple times with senior management," he said. "It's unbelievable that someone would hide under a bed. It's such an unusual and bizarre behavior." Finch explained that crime scene examiners would compromise crucial forensic evidence if they routinely lifted up beds to look for people who were not likely to be there. On August 11th, Rosalia received the devastating news that her 20-year-old son, Tibor, and his friend Alice had been murdered. It was unthinkable and heart-wrenching to accept that such a tragedy could occur. Rosalia had previously taken comfort in knowing that Tibor had found a reliable and trustworthy friend in London who was mature, friendly, and intelligent. This friend had personally promised Rosalia that he would look out for her son and ensure his safety. Rosalia had trusted him implicitly and regarded him as a member of her own family. This made the news of Tibor's murder all the more crushing. Throughout the police investigation and trial, Rosalia was forced to relive the horrors of that fateful night, which only intensified her grief. The agony and loss that the family has had to endure for the rest of their lives is indescribable. Attila Bond, whose name is actually Attila Bahn, pleaded guilty to a crime but claimed he had no memory of the horrific events that occurred on July 18, 2012. After deliberating for only 5 hours, the jury delivered a verdict on August 17th, finding the 32-year-old guilty. As a result, he was given 2 life sentences and will be required to serve at least 26 years in prison before becoming eligible to request parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a warm afternoon in Bond Beach, Florida, a man named Muhammad walked into the police department to report a disturbing incident. He told the police that he had been approached by a woman named Delilah who had asked him to commit murder. Muhammad claimed that Delilah had offered to hire him for this task, but he failed to provide her last name. Despite this crucial omission, the Bond Beach Police Department found Muhammad's story believable and decided to launch an investigation. The detective's task was to identify the mysterious Delilah and determine who her husband was. To gather more information, they decided to use Muhammad as bait to set up a meeting with Delilah. They chose the mobile gas station as the meeting location. As Muhammad said, Delilah lived nearby. At the mobile gas station, the detectives set up several surveillance vehicles to monitor the meeting. Before Delilah arrived, they briefed Muhammad on what to say to her. The detectives discreetly fitted Muhammad with a wire and recorder, allowing them to secretly record his conversation with Delilah as it happened. As the detectives kept watch on the mobile gas station, they focused on the exchange between Muhammad and a woman named Delilah. What struck the detectives as unusual was Delilah's appearance, which didn't fit the typical profile of someone seeking to have their husband killed. Clad in a skirt and tank top, she seemed quite attractive. Delilah got into the car with Muhammad. Muhammad expressed his disbelief that she was dragging him into a murder-for-hire plot. He asked her if it was worth getting someone killed, and Delilah confirmed that it was. Her reason was that she couldn't file for divorce because she feared her husband would retaliate against her if she tried to end their marriage and divide their assets. During their conversation, the woman openly admitted that she had planned to create an alibi for herself by going to a different location, such as Boca Raton, at the time of her husband's murder. When Muhammad asked if anyone would suspect her of involvement in her husband's death, she confidently replied that no one would suspect her. The detectives were stunned as they listened to Muhammad's conversation with the woman who was seeking to have her husband killed. They were particularly shocked by her casual and nonchalant attitude towards hiring a hitman to commit the murder. As they continued to listen, the woman even went as far as to show Muhammad pictures of her husband, providing him with a visual description of the intended target. The detectives were stunned by the woman's brazen lack of concern about the consequences of her actions. Her relaxed behavior and tone made it seem like she was discussing a routine business deal, not arranging for someone's murder. During the conversation, the woman made a shocking admission to Muhammad. She revealed that she planned to pay a deposit to a hitman to kill her husband. This admission was a major breakthrough for the detectives, as it confirmed their suspicions of soliciting murder. However, they knew they needed more evidence to build a stronger case. The woman suggested to Muhammad that she would withdraw $1,000 in cash and hand it over to the hitman at a later time. After completing her conversation with Muhammad about hiring someone to kill her husband, the woman got back into her vehicle and drove away from the mobile gas station. The detectives trailed behind her, gathering information about her residential address. Upon conducting a records check, they discovered that the address was actually registered under the name Dahlia Diao, not Delilah, as they had initially thought. Armed with this new information, the detectives investigated the vehicle Dahlia used to travel to the gas station, where she met with Muhammad. This led them to discover the registered owner's name, her husband, Mike Dew. To their friends, Mike and Dahlia seemed like a loving and happy couple. Mike and Dahlia met when Mike was bored at work and browsing the internet to pass the time. He stumbled upon a website offering escort services and decided to order one. Unbeknownst to him, this decision would alter his life forever. When the escort arrived, Mike was immediately captivated by her beauty. He thought she was stunning, and a spark developed between them instantly. They found themselves deeply engaged in friendly conversation over the next few days. Mike and Dahlia's friendship blossomed, and they spent an entire weekend together soon after. The time they shared was enjoyable, and they quickly realized that their connection went beyond friendship. From that moment on, Mike and Dahlia formed a committed partnership. A few months into their relationship, they stumbled upon an engagement ring store while browsing at a local jewelry shop, which sparked a conversation about marriage, a topic they had previously discussed. Mike became captivated by the idea of spending his life with Dahlia and decided to purchase a ring, symbolizing his commitment to their future together. Despite their relationship progressing rapidly, Mike felt deeply happy and in love. Prior to meeting Dahlia, Mike had served a prison sentence in 2001 for grand theft and fraudulent phone sales. He was convicted in Broward County, Florida, 2 years after the initial offenses. At the time, Mike was struggling with drug addiction and was in dire need of money, which he later acknowledged was no excuse for his actions. Mike received a 2-year prison sentence, accompanied by 28 years of probation. The court's intention behind this lengthy probation period was to give Mike sufficient time to repay his debt. However, upon his release, Mike was uncertain about how he would manage to do so. Determined to repay his debt, Mike landed a cooking job at a restaurant, earning $350 weekly, but it was far from enough to make a significant dent in the substantial amount he owed. He wanted a better financial situation to pay off his debt and secure his release from probation. A friend helped Mike transition from cooking to email marketing by offering him an office job just 4 blocks from his house. As Mike started dating Dahlia, he eventually opened up about his probation, informing her about the limitations of his situation, including the need for permission to leave the state. Dahlia expressed her desire to explore the world with Mike, but Mike's debt was a major obstacle. Dahlia then approached Mike with an offer to help him get out from under his debt, proposing that she give him $91,000 if he provided the remainder, which would allow them to clear the debt and embark on a travel-filled life that Dahlia longed for. At the time, Dahlia, a real estate agent, earned a good income. Her financial stability enabled her to help Mike clear his debt and restore his reputation. To resolve the situation, Mike consulted his attorney, who advised him to raise the required funds, promising that Mike would be cleared of his probation once he did so. Dahlia and Mike, following their attorney's guidance, agreed that the safest and most convenient approach would be for Dahlia to deposit the money into her Bank of America account. Since Mike had recently gotten married and was eager to settle his probation, he was thrilled when Dahlia informed him that she had wired the money to his attorney from her account. However, when Mike inquired about the transfer status, his attorney disappointingly told him that the funds had not yet been received from Dahlia. Mike grew increasingly worried and contacted his attorney again, only to be told that they still hadn't received anything. Dahlia claimed she had sent the money to the attorney, but couldn't explain the delay or why they hadn't gotten it. 2 days had passed since the transaction, yet the attorney remained empty-handed. Mike asked Dahlia to reveal where she had sent the funds, explaining he needed the receipt to double-check the transaction details. Dahlia, however, suspected that the attorney might have stolen the money. Meanwhile, Mike hoped to move past the misunderstanding with Dahlia. In the meantime, a supervisor from the Boone Beach Police Department reached out to Sergeant Whitey Jean, an undercover officer, for assistance. The detective briefed Sergeant Whitey Jean on the case, telling him that Dahlia was trying to hire someone to kill her husband. The detective asked Sergeant Whitey Jean to pretend to be the hitman and arrange a meeting with Dahlia. Sergeant Whitey Jean agreed to help and took on the role of the hitman. Pretending to be the hitman, Sergeant Whitey Jean contacted Dahlia and demanded $3,000 up front and the key to her house. The detective had requested the key as part of their plan to make Dahlia think the murder would happen at her home. However, Dahlia was unhappy with this and shared her concerns with Muhammad, the informant. During a phone call between Muhammad and Dahlia, a detective listened in and worried that they might have frightened her off. The detectives were concerned that Dahlia might now change her mind and find someone else to kill her husband. On August 3, 2009, Dahlia met with Sergeant Whitey Jean, an undercover detective posing as a hitman, in a CVS parking lot. However, Dahlia didn't bring the payment, so Sergeant Whitey Jean told her he wouldn't wait until after the murder to get paid. Instead, she needed to give him $7,000 in cash up front. Sergeant Whitey Jean suggested planning the fake hit for Wednesday morning, taking advantage of recent robberies in the area to make the assassination appear legitimate. He explained to Dahlia that he would stage a break-in and make it look like a burglary had occurred. He would then shoot Mike twice in the head to make it seem like a real crime. Sergeant Whitey Jean reassured Dahlia that he would wait a few days to contact her after the murder, knowing the police would be closely watching her in the aftermath of such a crime. During a conversation with Sergeant Whitey Jean, Dahlia had every opportunity to back down from the murder-for-hire plan. But instead, she confidently stated that she was 5,000% certain about her decision, indicating that her mind was made up and that she was fully committed to having her husband killed. Dahlia shared crucial information with Sergeant Whitey Jean about her husband's daily routine, revealing that Mike walked the dog at a specific time every morning and left the house unlocked. This information was key to her plan to deceive him and ensure the murder's success. She told Sergeant Whitey Jean that she would go to the gym at the time of the murder, ensuring she would be absent from the house while he entered. Sergeant Whitey Jean instructed Dahlia to go to the gym by 6 a.m. and informed her that he would enter her home at 6:30 a.m. Following the conversation, Sergeant Whitey Jean was shocked by Dahlia's apparent malicious intentions. Having dealt with many individuals in his work, the sergeant had never encountered anyone who exhibited the same level of cruelty as Dahlia. The detective thought it was crucial to stage a fake crime scene at Dahlia and Mike's home to gauge Dahlia's reaction on the day of the supposed hit, around 5:30 a.m. Dahlia told Mike she was going to the gym, which Mike found unusual since she had never gone that early before. However, he didn't think much of it and continued with his morning routine. The detective kept an eye on Dahlia to ensure she went to the gym and went inside, giving the necessary confirmation to proceed with their plan. Before setting up the fake crime scene, the detective needed to brief Mike about the situation. About 30 minutes after Dahlia left for the gym, a loud banging noise echoed through Mike and Dahlia's house, prompting Mike to rush to the door. When he opened it, he was shocked to find several police officers standing outside. Confused and alarmed, Mike asked what was happening. The detective stepped forward and revealed that his wife had allegedly hired someone to kill him, but the person was actually an undercover cop. The detective explained that the entire situation was a ruse designed to look like a real assassination attempt. Mike was left stunned when police officers appeared at his front door, revealing that his wife Dahlia had allegedly hired someone to kill him. Once the initial shock began to wear off, the detectives emphasized that time was critical and Mike needed to leave the premises right away. They then took him to the police station. Meanwhile, at Mike and Dahlia's home, detectives set up a fake crime scene, complete with crime scene tape and flashing police car lights to make it look like a serious crime had taken place there. When everything was in place, a detective contacted Dahlia, telling her that the police were at her house and needed to speak with her about an incident involving her husband. The detective asked Dahlia to return home for questioning. After speaking with the detective, Dahlia arrived back home to find her house cordoned off with crime scene tape and surrounded by police cars. She asked the detective what was happening and was told that they had received a report of a disturbance at her home, which included claims that shots had been fired. The detective then dropped the bombshell, telling Dahlia that a search of her house had supposedly uncovered the body of her husband, Mike. Dahlia was completely devastated by the news. She burst into tears as the reality of her husband's death finally hit her. The detective, who was no stranger to delivering bad news, thought Dahlia's reaction was unusual. Although she was clearly upset, he noticed that she wasn't actually crying. There were no tears at the police station. The detective started the interview by asking Dahlia about possible suspects in her husband's murder. His aim was to get her to admit that she had hired someone to kill him. He informed Dahlia that her husband had been shot twice in the head, watching her reaction closely. Dahlia believed that Mike would never open the door to a stranger. She explained that Mike was on probation for a stock fraud conviction and was struggling to get off probation. Dahlia claimed that the community was against Mike's release from probation because of his massive debt, and people were unsupportive. However, she insisted that their marriage was problem-free. Unaware that Mike was watching from another room, Dahlia was being interviewed by a detective. the detective told Dahlia they knew the truth about her husband's murder. Then, they brought in Sergeant Whitey Jean, who was handcuffed, and asked Dahlia if she knew him or had seen him before. Dahlia denied having any knowledge of or ever seeing Sergeant Whitey Jean. After Sergeant Whitey Jean was let out, the detective arrested Dahlia for soliciting murder. The detective revealed that the man Dahlia had hired to murder her husband was actually an undercover police officer. Dahlia was already in police custody when she was granted a meeting with her husband, Mike, the very person she had allegedly tried to have killed. When they faced each other, Dahlia attempted to beckon Mike over, but he refused to engage with her, making it clear that he couldn't help her out of this situation. What Mike really wanted was for Dahlia to own up to her attempt to have him killed, but she persisted in denying the allegations. The trial began on April 26, 2011, at the Palm Beach County Courthouse, where Dahlia faced charges of soliciting the murder of her husband, Mike. Mike testified against Dahlia, taking the stand for 3 days. Dahlia's defense team claimed that the plot to kill Mike was merely a publicity stunt for a reality TV show, and that Mike had actually masterminded the whole thing. However, Mike denied any involvement or knowledge of such a plan during his testimony. He insisted that he had no interest in appearing on a reality show, refuted Dahlia's claims, and emphasized that he would never risk his own safety or waste his money on such a scheme. After the defense and prosecution presented their cases, the jury began deliberating. Following several hours of careful consideration, they reached a verdict. Dahlia was found guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder with a firearm. The courtroom was filled with gasps and murmurs as the verdict was read aloud. Mike, who had attended the entire trial, felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, he was relieved that Dahlia would serve a 20-year prison sentence, which he considered a just outcome given the severity of her actions. On the other hand, Mike felt a sense of closure, knowing that justice had been served and he could finally move on with his life. However, Dahlia's attorneys appealed the verdict, arguing that the jury's decision was tainted by a juror's remark about Dahlia attempting to poison Mike's Starbucks drink. Although this claim was never presented as evidence during the trial, the appellate court ultimately reversed Dahlia's conviction, ruling that she was entitled to a new trial. Mike was shocked and dismayed that Dahlia would be given a second trial after being convicted of attempting to have him killed. As the state began its second trial in December 2016, it was confident in the evidence that showed Dahlia had solicited her husband's murder. However, to the state's disappointment, the jury was unable to reach a verdict, and the judge declared a mistrial. Undeterred, the state launched a third trial in June 2017. This time, the jury reached a verdict within 90 minutes, finding Dahlia guilty and sentencing her to 16 years in prison. In September 2019, the Florida Supreme Court rejected an appeal from Dahlia's defense team, which had requested a review of her 2017 conviction. Dahlia's defense team then attempted to take the case to the U.S. Supreme Court, but in February 2020, the court declined to hear it. Despite this setback, Dahlia's attorney remains determined to overturn her conviction. They plan to file a motion with a federal judge, alleging constitutional violations in the third trial. This, they believe, is their last chance to secure a new trial for Dahlia. Meanwhile, Dahlia has become a respected figure in prison due to her strong faith. She leads a Bible study group, which has earned her praise from fellow inmates. Before her imprisonment, Dahlia had a young son who regularly visits her. However, due to her circumstances, her son currently lives with his grandmother until Dahlia completes her sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987 in South Africa. When she was just 10 years old, her father passed away. This tragic loss had a profound impact on her family, and they decided to Whitby, United Kingdom, to live with relatives. However, They did not find the peace they were seeking, and after some time, they returned to South Africa. Despite the challenges she faced, Carmen decided to stay with her relatives when she turned 18. She later moved to London, where she completed her studies and earned a master's degree in marketing. Carmen had a strong and charismatic personality that drew people to her. She was a loyal friend and companion to many, but living in a big city like London came with a high price tag. To maintain a decent standard of living, Carmen had to work hard. During the day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and in her free time, she worked part-time in a gentleman's club. Although her choice of part-time job may seem unusual, Carmen was a girl with strong values and never engaged in unnecessary or undignified behavior, which earned her the respect of her clients. In this place, she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Born in New Zealand in April 1978, Brad's parents separated when he was 9 years old, and he stayed with his mother. They later moved to Australia in 2001. After graduating from university with an engineering degree in the construction industry, Brad was offered a job as chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK. To boost his professional image, Brad hired a gentleman's agency and met Carmen, a beautiful, intelligent, and tall woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Although they started with a casual arrangement, Brad and Carmen continued to communicate informally, which eventually turned into a strong friendship and later, love. Their romantic relationship blossomed quickly, and they soon moved in together. Their life was built on trust, care, and mutual support, making them look absolutely happy. Carmen became pregnant, and Brad thought it would be best for them to move back to New Zealand, where the air is clean and the pace of life is more relaxed. They returned to Auckland in March 2005. After their son Jack was born, he brought immense joy and happiness into their lives from day one. Carmen and Brad prioritized his safety and well-being, providing everything he needed for a happy childhood. To them, Jack was the center of their universe. However, with Jack's arrival, serious disagreements began to surface in their relationship. The first disagreements arose over how to raise their child. As a result, their relationship became rocky and unstable, ultimately leading to their breakup 3 years later. Despite the challenges, they shared joint custody of Jack and made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for his sake. The breakup was difficult for both Carmen and Brad, but they put their differences aside to ensure little Jack's well-being. Carmen and Jack moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, in Oakland, seeking emotional support and a sense of family. As time passed, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started rebuilding her life without Brad. In 2008, she decided to move to a house on a nearby street to Brad's so her young son could be closer to his father. Carmen, who had lost her own father at a young age, wanted to ensure her child would have a father figure in his life as much as possible. Carmen and Brad maintained a relationship for the sake of their son, but many people mistakenly thought they remained couple. In truth, they only communicated when necessary to support their child. As they went their separate ways, both Carmen and Brad concentrated on finding personal happiness. Brad continued his career as a construction engineer and eventually started a new relationship in May 2009, which led to an engagement. Carmen focused on raising their son while working at the gentleman's club, which upset Brad. He thought the mother of his child should not be involved in questionable activities. This disagreement created tension in their relationship, which worsened over time. Carmen issued ultimatums, but Brad ignored them. Despite this, Brad got married again and was expecting another child. His new financial responsibilities affected the alimony he paid Carmen for Jack's care. The money issue triggered a series of scandals. On March 19, 2010, neighbors called the police due to a domestic violence incident. Carmen was involved in a physical altercation with Brad during an argument and received a warning. Their relationship finally broke down. Even after separation, arguments continued. Each new question about Jack's care sparked aggression and conflict between the two former lovers. They couldn't agree on something as simple as which school Jack should attend, leading to more disputes. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to finalize a written agreement for child support and discuss a new school for Jack. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and refused to sign it. In a heated argument, she shouted that Jack was not Brad's son and told him to leave. Brad departed. 2 weeks passed without Brad contacting Carmen. Concerned for her safety, Brad reported Carmen Thomas missing to the police on July 13, 2010. The authorities took his report and launched an investigation. By analyzing video footage and interviewing neighbors, investigators were able to piece together a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance, uncovering crucial details that would aid in the search for her. On June 29th, a surveillance camera caught Carmen on tape at a nearby supermarket, not far from the house she shared with Jack. The police were alerted to the house when they noticed that there was no garbage can outside, which seemed unusual. Upon inspecting the house, they found traces of blood on the front door, washing machine, and shower. Forensic experts used luminol to detect blood evidence, which reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of bloodstains on the bathroom door and floor, confirming their suspicions. The landlady reported that on June 29th she heard loud screams, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. She went to Carmen's door, but no one answered. When she looked out the window, she saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack on the ground. Alarmed, she called her husband. Before he arrived, Brad emerged from the house, holding dirty clothes. When he saw the landlady, he hastily explained that Carmen had undergone a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlady was suspicious, noting that Brad looked like he had just showered. Despite her doubts, she didn't call the police, as she had no reason to disbelieve Brad's story. The police investigation focused on Carmen's cell phone, which showed a steady stream of messages and calls. However, the tone and style of these communications didn't match Carmen's usual way of communicating. This sparked even more questions. Where did Carmen go for medical help, and why? Fortunately, the answers weren't far off. As the investigation continued, Carmen's car was discovered. In the back seat, her personal belongings, including luggage and clothes, were found. A closer look at the seized suitcase revealed bloodstains on some items. A note in the car revealed that Carmen owed money to her employer. A surprising discovery was made in the glove compartment, an envelope with Misty's name on it, containing $270. Police Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after discovering bloodstains in Carmen's car. A search of the countryside southeast of Auckland was conducted, but Carmen's body was not found. The investigation continued, with detectives analyzing Carmen's and Brad's phone records. They made a surprising discovery. Both phones were in the same location throughout the search period, and Carmen's phone hadn't connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had vanished from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen disappeared. A neighbor had seen it through her window. But why was it necessary for the trash can to be inside the house in the first place? The police investigated Brad's phone and financial records, which revealed some suspicious purchases on June 30th, including a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and garbage bags. By examining Brad's daily routine, they found some unusual events that didn't fit his normal pattern. One day, he arrived at the construction site very early and spent a long time walking alone around the property. While this was unusual, it wasn't enough to raise concern among the workers who saw him. As the evidence mounted, including Carmen's phone and Brad's questionable purchases, he went from being a victim to a suspect. The police believed that Brad had killed Carmen by hitting her on the head multiple times and then hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to modify the course of justice. He pleaded not guilty and was scheduled for trial. In a surprising coincidence, Brad's second son was born to his new partner while he was in custody, causing a wave of emotion and resentment in the young father. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators where he had buried Carmen's body. Brad concocted a plan to make it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never came back. Confident in his scheme, he was convinced he'd pulled it off. However, life had other plans. Under interrogation, Brad recounted the events of that fateful day. It began with a heated argument, which ended with Carmen kicking Brad out of the house and claiming Jack wasn't his son. Brad left, but 5 minutes later, he returned and struck Carmen on the head with a baseball bat, rendering her unconscious. The impact was severe, causing blood to gush from the wound and stain the floor bright red, accompanied by labored breathing. Standing over Carmen's lifeless body, Brad's eyes blazed with a wild, unhinged expression. He realized the gravity of his actions, but his anger and resentment towards Carmen's words clouded his judgment. In a fit of rage, he unleashed several more punches. Although aware of the irreparable consequences, his obsessive fury consumed him. Fleeting memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but they were now forever lost. Brad knew his life would never be the same after that devastating moment, but he felt no remorse as he had eliminated his primary problem, and Jack was now exclusively his. After regaining consciousness, Brad took a shower and discreetly left Carmen's house. In the subsequent days, he took swift action to dispose of Carmen's body and conceal the evidence of the crime. He contacted his friend and arranged to meet him outside a supermarket, asking him to purchase 3 black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning supplies. Brad waited outside the store, trying to avoid raising suspicions. Once his friend had made the purchase, Brad returned to the apartment and began the cleanup process. He meticulously wiped away the blood spatter and then placed the body in a garbage bag, which he later discarded in a trash can. After Carmen's murdered, the defendant cut her body into 8 pieces to dispose of it. He severed her legs at the hip joints, then cut each leg into 2 pieces at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. On July 3rd, he confided in a friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay, Oakland, telling him that he had killed Carmen during an argument and needed help to get rid of the body. However, the friend refused to lend him a boat, and the attempt to dump the remains at sea failed. Over the next few days, the defendant drove to Wyrie Ridge in West Auckland and buried the body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot, leaving behind a suitcase of clothes and other personal belongings to make it seem like she had intentionally left. However, in his hurry, he failed to notice that the suitcase also contained bloody clothes. After disposing of the car, Brad attempted to create the illusion that Carmen was still alive by sending text messages from her cell phone to her friends. He pretended to be Carmen, claiming she was unwell and had been in poor health for days. However, Brad's plan ultimately failed. On October 1st, the police searched the burial site indicated by Brad and discovered Carmen's body. Her remains were found in plastic containers in a makeshift grave on Wyrie Ridge, and an autopsy revealed that she had died from multiple head injuries, including a fatal blow that caused a compressed skull fracture. After forensic examinations, Carmen's body was returned to her family for burial. A private funeral was held at Green Lane Christian Center on October 13th to honor Carmen, a young mother known for her cheerful, kind, and successful nature. Her son, little Jack, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket, having waited and hoped to see and hug his mother. The first court hearing for Carmen's case took place on February 8, 2011. Judge Venning found the crime to be unintentional, taking into account Brad's claim that he acted in a fit of rage. While Judge Venning acknowledged this, he was less lenient when it came to Brad's attempted cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to obstruct justice. According to the police investigation, on July 29, 2010, Callahan fatally struck Carmen Thomas multiple times in the head. He then sent a text message to a friend asking for 3 garbage bags and a bottle of kerosene. Subsequently, Callahan dismembered Carmen's body into 8 pieces to dispose of it. On November 25, 2011, a retrial was held, and police officers involved in the case filled the Auckland High Court. Unexpectedly, Brad Callahan pleaded guilty to 2 charges: murder and attempting to obstruct justice following Carmen's death. This was a reversal of his previous denial of guilt. The judge described Callahan's actions as one of the most serious cases of attempting to pervert the course of justice, stating it was as serious as it gets. The judge also characterized the murder of Carmen Thomas as brutal, but not severe enough to warrant the harshest sentencing laws. A 33-year-old man, Brad Callahan, was sentenced to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas in Auckland High Court. The court was packed with Carmen's friends and family, including her parents, who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venning condemned Callahan's attempts to cover his tracks, describing them as insufficient to bring him to justice. Callahan will serve his life sentence and 6 years for attempting to pervert the course of justice concurrently. Detective Inspector Mark Benefield stated that Callahan's actions had a devastating impact on 2 families and that he had effectively passed judgment on himself. Callahan's supporters left the court without commenting. Carmen's family expressed their grief and anger over her tragic loss, grateful that Callahan will be imprisoned for a long time to reflect on the harm he caused. Her mother, Teresa Scott, was left completely devastated by the incident. Detective Mark Benefield explained that the 10-week investigation into Carmen's disappearance involved hundreds of hours of police work. Early on, they suspected she was murdered and carefully gathered evidence, following proper legal procedures. Benefield praised the cooperation with the defendant's employer and ongoing efforts to search the construction site for more evidence. He didn't rule out further arrests or charges related to Carmen's death. The Thomas family is devastated, saying they'll never forgive Brad for his actions. However, Carmen's stepfather, Wayne Callahan, and his attorney, Stuart Grieve, acknowledged Brad's acceptance of responsibility and won't challenge the sentence. The case raises concerns about potential biases against Carmen due to her profession, but emphasizes that the victim is not to blame and Brad's actions were inexcusable. The case has garnered significant media attention due to its rarity in New Zealand. The impact on Carmen's young son, Jack, who now lives under an assumed name, is also discussed, with the need to protect him from learning the truth about his mother's fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ben Rennick. In 1989, the Rennick family relocated to a charming farmhouse where Ben developed an interest in snakes. However, their happiness was short-lived. In September 1992, a gas leak caused an explosion at their home while they were away, forcing them to move into a trailer. Rennick family faced another challenge when Ben's mother, Kim, was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. Despite these difficulties, the close-knit family supported each other through thick and thin. In 2002, they moved into a new home that included a special room for Ben's snakes. Tragically, Kim lost her battle with cancer in 2009. Before her passing, she made her sons promise to preserve the farm and pass it down to their children. Ben's passion for snakes only grew stronger, and he eventually founded Rennick Reptiles, earning recognition worldwide. He began selling snakes globally, from the UK to Japan, and breeding them became his life's purpose. Ben, a dedicated and passionate breeder, put the needs of his snakes above financial gain. His reptile farm was a treasure trove of reptilian subspecies, featuring both common and rare species from around the world. The value of his python collection alone exceeded $1 million. Despite his professional success, Ben felt lonely and longed to start a family. That changed in 2010 when he met Lindley at a party. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and soon he introduced her to his brother Sam and his fiancée, Eli. As it turned out, both Eli and Lindley had sons from previous relationships, which helped them bond and become fast friends. Lyne seamlessly integrated into the Renton family, and they began living together. As Ben's partner, Lyne assisted him on the snake breeding farm. They were deeply in love and functioned as a united family even before making their relationship official. In March 2012, Lyne gave birth to their daughter, Amelia, filling Ben with joy as he became a first-time father. However, their happiness was short-lived, as Ben's father, Frank Renton, faced significant business troubles stemming from fraudulent stock transactions made to cover medical bills for his wife, Kim's treatment. Frank took his own life just one day before the FBI was scheduled to visit the farm. The investigation came to a halt as a result, and Frank's sons, Ben and Sam, were deeply affected by the loss of their father. After their parents' passing, the brothers put aside their grief to support each other. Ben inherited the family home and farm, while Sam received a large sum of money that was significantly more than the house was worth. Despite having their own families and children, the brothers decided to stay together in their childhood home, forming one large, close-knit family. Sam used his inheritance to repair the farm, and initially everything seemed fine. However, financial disagreements soon caused tension between the brothers. After their father's passing, Ben focused on his business and family. He married Lyne on April 14, 2014, making her a full member of the Renton family. Ben and Lyne opened a second business, a spa called Essentia Spa Inc., which Lyne managed. However, the spa struggled financially, leading to frequent arguments between Ben and Lyne about money. Despite her best efforts, Lyne was unable to generate enough revenue to cover the spa's expenses. At the same time, Sam and his wife struggled financially. Ben granted them permission to sell some of the furniture in the house, but Lyne strongly disagreed with this decision, which caused a rift between the two families and ultimately led to an irreparable breakdown in their relationship. Ben planned to sell some rare reptiles to improve his family's finances, but the deal fell through because of a tragic event that occurred on the farm on June 8, 2017. On that day, Lyne found her husband Ben lying in a pool of blood on the floor of one of the farm's barns. She called her brother-in-law Sam for help and reported the emergency, saying she had found Ben unconscious. During the call, Lyne abruptly dropped the phone and ran outside. Sam continued talking to the emergency operator and sadly confirmed that his brother had died. Sam suspected that a snake might be responsible for the incident. The Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies were eventually called to the snake breeding facility, a place they hadn't visited in a long time. However, they were hesitant to enter the farm, fearing they would encounter over 3,000 snakes while investigating the scene where Ben's body lay in blood. Coroner Dave Colbert approached the scene with caution, aware of the possibility of a deadly viper attack. However, upon closer inspection, he found a shell casing on a shelf, indicating a far more sinister scenario. Multiple shell casings were discovered near the body, but no weapon was found. The autopsy revealed that Ben had been shot multiple times in the back and head. Despite this, none of the relatives reported hearing any shots or seeing the attacker. Sam and Lyne, Ben's relatives, were taken to the sheriff's office for questioning. During the interview, Lyne suggested that Sam might have been involved in Ben's death, citing a potential motive. Ben wanted to sell the house, but Sam was opposed. To clear his name, Sam agreed to take a lie detector test, which he passed. With no evidence to hold them, the police released Lyne and Sam. The investigation continued, exploring various theories about who might have wanted Ben Renton dead. The police initially suspected that Ben Renton's death might be linked to robbery, but this theory was quickly ruled out because none of the rare snakes in the house were taken and no valuables were missing. In the days following Ben's death, the police questioned Lyne, Ben's wife, and tested her hands and clothing for signs of gunpowder residue. However, the test results came back negative. After Ben's funeral, Lyne cut off all contact with her brothers-in-law, Sam and Eli, and began making moves to sell her husband's business, and claim a $1 million life insurance payout. Her plan was to use the insurance money to pay off the mortgage on the Renton family home, which she intended to sell for $740,000. When Sam and Eli found out about Lindley's quick insurance claim and her plans to sell the house, they became suspicious and notified the authorities. Sam, in particular, suspected that his brother's wife might be involved in Ben's death and shared his concerns with the investigators. As a result, Lindley was questioned again by the police, during which she revealed that she had a complicated relationship with Ben and had been secretly meeting with a man named Eric. Although Eric had an alibi, it seemed suspicious to the investigators. Lindley made some stunning confessions. Approximately 3 years into her officially recognized marriage, she admitted to having had affairs with at least 2 different men. Furthermore, text messages exchanged between the couples imply that Ben had been suspicious of his wife's infidelity, which had been causing significant tension in their relationship lately. On October 5, 2017, Lindley underwent a polygraph test conducted by the Missouri State Highway Patrol, but the results indicated deception. While the test raised suspicions, it did not provide sufficient concrete evidence to directly implicate her in Ben's murder, so she was released from custody. The investigation persisted, albeit at a slower pace. It was later discovered that Lindley had attempted to kill Ben a month before his death. She had fabricated a story about Ben being abusive and shared it with a coworker at a spa salon, gaining their sympathy and assistance. The coworker helped Lindley plot to kill Ben by making him a protein shake laced with 15 Percocet pills. Unbeknownst to Ben, he drank the shake and fell severely ill, but survived, unaware that he had been poisoned. Lindley was questioned by investigators 6 times. A major breakthrough came on January 14, 2012, when a witness from a state prison came forward claiming to have information about Ben's death. The witness, Brandon Blackwell, told investigators that Lindley had shot Ben and conspired with her ex-boyfriend. Brandon said he dated Lindley, who was married to Ben, and they had a child together about 1.5 years after Ben's death. However, by 2019, they had broken up. Brandon claimed that Lindley told him she plotted with her coworker Ashley Shaw and her ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey to kill Ben. Lindley and Michael were arrested for Ben's murder, but they blamed each other for the crime. Michael said that on the day of the murder, Lindley asked him to pose as a buyer at the farm, and he was supposed to shoot Ben while wearing gloves. However, he couldn't bring himself to do it. According to Michael, Lindley then took the gun and shot Ben herself. The investigation into Ben's death took 3 years. On January 16, 2020, arrest warrants were issued for Lindley, Michael, and Ashley. Ashley was given immunity in exchange for her cooperation and testified against Lindley, her former boss at the spa salon. Ashley said that Lindley had complained about Ben, claiming he was abusive and belittling, and convinced her to help with a plan to kill him. Lindley feared that if she divorced Ben, he would gain custody of their children, so she plotted to kill him by poisoning him with a lethal cocktail. When questioned, Lindley and her accomplice Michael accused each other of Ben's murder. In October 2021, Michael Humphrey went on trial in Ain County. His lawyers hoped to reduce his sentence by revealing the murder weapon, which would lead to a second-degree murder charge. Although Michael had the gun, no conclusive DNA evidence was found on it to lessen his sentence. However, he made a deal with the prosecution, revealing the location of the murder weapon. In exchange, he received a life sentence for second-degree murder, without a trial, on January 3, 2021. This meant Michael Humphrey would be imprisoned for life, with the possibility of parole. The trial of Lindley Renton started on December 6, 2021, for the shooting death of her husband Ben Renton on June 8, 2017, at his snake breeding facility in New Florence. According to court documents, the plot to kill Ben originated at Lindley's spa salon. The probable cause statement revealed that Ben knew about Lindley's financial troubles and her fear that he might take their children away. leading her to falsely claim domestic abuse. The first attempt on Ben's life involved a protein shake laced with drugs, which was confirmed by search warrants for their Facebook accounts. These searches also showed that Ben was aware of Lindley's financial issues. In court, the events of the day Ben was killed were reconstructed through cross-examination. On that day, Michael Humphrey picked up Lindley from the spa salon, while Shaw sent deceptive text messages from Lindley's phone, hiding their true location and trying to mislead the investigation, according to court documents. Humphrey tried to kill Ben, but couldn't finish the job, so he asked Lindley to do it for him after firing some shots. In his hurry, Humphrey picked up most of the bullet casings, but missed a few. After returning to the spa, Lindley took a shower, which helped remove any gunpowder residue from her hands and clothes. Humphrey also got rid of Lindley's clothing to avoid raising suspicion. During the trial, defense attorney Catherine Barrere tried to portray Lindley as a victim of domestic violence by highlighting her personal history, family, education, and her relationship with ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey. However, no evidence supported this claim, weakening the defense's argument. Lindley was involved with Michael Humphrey, who was part of a group that plotted to kill Ben. Lindley described their relationship as codependent, with Humphrey dealing drugs and her being addicted. She broke up with Humphrey in 2010, but reconnected with him about a month before Ben's murder. Lindley Rennick denied planning to kill her husband Ben, including the alleged attempt to poison him with a protein shake. At the time, their spa business was failing, and they were experiencing financial and marital problems. Lindley admitted to having affairs with multiple men, which she deeply regretted. When she considered divorce, she didn't know who to turn to, given her father's experience with divorce and his strong views on the matter. She reconnected with an old boyfriend, Michael Humphrey, seeking support to discuss divorce with Ben. In court, Lindley confessed to intentionally hiding Michael's involvement in Ben's death due to their troubled marriage, which included disagreements, physical and sexual abuse, and the stress of Ben's snake breeding business. She was afraid of Ben and worried about his reaction when she would bring up divorce. On June 8, 2017, Lindley brought Michael to their farm, claiming she only wanted to discuss divorce, not harm Ben. She took out the trash, then saw Michael and Ben washing their hands in the nursery. She didn't hear their conversation, focusing on how to initiate the divorce discussion. Lindley described seeing Michael draw a gun and shoot Ben, after which she screamed, ran outside, and heard more shots. Everything seemed numb, and she stared at the trees as Michael came to her and pushed her towards the car. When she returned to the snake breeding facility and saw Ben's body, reality hit her. She called Ben's brother, Sam, and they checked Ben's pulse and breathing, hoping he might still be alive. Lindley regretted not telling the police about her presence at the facility with Michael, which led to suspicion and investigation. Although there was a $1 million life insurance policy, Lindley waived her rights to the money. She received some financial compensation from a trust set up by Ben's father, which benefited Ben and their children, not herself. Lindley shared her story with her then-boyfriend Brandon Blackwell, but their relationship ended after she had his child during the trial. She expressed remorse for her continuous deception, saying she was trying to escape the truth of what happened and never wanted her husband's death. Lindley Rennick's defense team did not request a new trial or appeal her conviction. Instead, she filed a lawsuit against Blackwell, accusing him of making false statements about her role in her husband's death. During the trial, prosecutor Kevin Zellner questioned Lindley Rennick's credibility, pointing out inconsistencies in her story. He asked why she didn't check on her husband after hearing gunshots, didn't call 911, sent friendly messages to Blackwell and Humphrey after the shooting, and continued to lie as emergency responders arrived. Lindley Rennick admitted to suggesting her brother-in-law as a suspect, and Zellner portrayed her as a calculating but clumsy mastermind. He accused her of being heartless for accusing the victim's brother. On December 9, 2021, Lynley Rennick was found guilty of second-degree murder and armed criminal action. She broke down during sentencing, receiving 13 years for murder and 3 years for armed criminal action. In January, the judge sentenced her to a total of 16 years. The victim's family, including Sam Rennick, was outraged, believing Lynley and her co-conspirator deserved life imprisonment. Sam Rennick expressed his disappointment, shocked that his son's life was valued at only 13 years. He felt that Ben's death had destroyed their relationship. However, Ben Rennick's legacy lives on. The reptile community was shaken by his death and decided to honor him by naming a new snake species after him. They collected donations to support his family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lauren Heike. Life can be unpredictable, filled with both joyous moments and heart-wrenching tragedies. The story of Lauren Heike, 29-year-old from Phoenix, Arizona, serves as a poignant reminder of how fragile our existence can be and how quickly everything can change. Lauren, a beautiful soul with captivating green eyes, had an unwavering faith in the goodness of others. Little did she know that her trust and openness would ultimately lead to her untimely demise. Lauren Heike was born on November 20, 1993, in Seattle, Washington, into a well-off family. Her father, Jeff, owned a plumbing manufacturing business, and her mother, Lana, worked in real estate. She was very close to her older brother, Ryan. Lauren received her secondary education at Central Kitsap High School in Silverdale, Washington. After graduation, she moved to Phoenix and enrolled at the Gary Manuel Leda Institute, where she studied to become a cosmetologist and skincare specialist. Lauren always took great care of herself and had a good understanding of cosmetics, so her education helped her develop her natural inclinations. She began her career at the age of 18 and built a successful path. Initially, she worked as a customer support representative for 5 years, starting in 2015. Lauren then became a leading manager at the renowned cosmetics company Benefit before working as a cosmetologist at a beauty salon for 9 months in October 2020. She later got a job as a manager at the Center for Aesthetic Medicine. She also planned to follow in her mother's footsteps and try her hand in the real estate field. At the time of the tragedy, Lauren was working full-time as an instructor at a golf club. She was never afraid of difficulties, was responsible, and easily found common ground with people. She was actively developing in the beauty industry, sports, and real estate. Lauren carefully monitored her physical fitness, regularly engaging in fitness activities, and generally led a healthy, active lifestyle. She had many friends and a supportive family. In addition to working in sports and meeting with friends, she adored traveling and hiking. It was because of the presence of picturesque trails that she loved Phoenix so much. Lauren often walked alone, listening to music and enjoying the fresh air, silence, and tranquility of nature. Her favorite route was a path in the northern part of the city, not far from her apartment, where there was almost never anyone around. Understandably, her parents were very concerned about her solitary walks in deserted places, but Lauren herself was convinced that nothing bad could happen to her. According to her family, Lauren had a kind of routine. She would wake up, drink coffee, chat with loved ones and friends, and then go for a walk. She did this every day because she believed that this way she would start the new day with positivity. Unfortunately, she did not realize that her trusting nature and carefree attitude could cause a fatal role. On April 28, 2023, Lauren's morning began as usual. She drank coffee, talked with family and friends on the phone, and went for her usual walk in the northern district of Phoenix, not far from her own apartment. The route passed through a picturesque trail in a calm, quiet, sparsely populated area, and took 15 to 30 minutes one way. The girl left the house at approximately 10:30 a.m. The last time surveillance cameras recorded her was at 10:52, when Lauren was calmly walking along the trail in the park. She was wearing a pink sports top, black leggings, and sneakers. She only had her phone and keys with her. No one saw her again. Lauren was supposed to show up for work at 11:30, but did not come and did not warn about her delay or absence. This was uncharacteristic for a very responsible girl. Colleagues started calling her, but to no avail. Lauren's phone was turned off. Worried friends began sending messages on social networks and calling each other, hoping that someone knew where Lauren was. But no one could say anything because no one had seen her after she left the house in the morning. Around 1 p.m., Lauren's parents, unable to reach her, arrived at her apartment hoping their daughter was unwell and had not gone to work. However, Lauren was not home, though her belongings were undisturbed and the doors locked. No signs of a break-in or struggle were evident. It appeared she had gone for a walk and not returned. Concerned, her family promptly contacted the police to report her missing. Law enforcement responded swiftly, but initial searches proved futile. The sunny day of April 28th, typical for the area, saw few visitors at the park where Lauren was last seen walking. Had someone been present during the attack, perhaps the tragedy could have been averted, but fate dictated otherwise. As hours passed with no word from Lauren, anxiety mounted among her loved ones. Despite extensive searches of the park and surrounding areas, no clues surfaced. Hoping she had simply wandered off or was delayed, family and friends reached out in vain. The next morning, April 29th, around 11 a.m., the worst fears were realized when a passerby discovered Lauren's body. The woman promptly contacted the authorities, who found Lauren's body, riddled with stab wounds, a short distance from the trail in the undergrowth. She lay face up, arms outstretched, clothes torn, blood everywhere. Forensic experts quickly began their investigation. The medical examiner later determined her death on April 28th around 11 a.m. was due to severe blood loss from 15 deep knife wounds, likely inflicted with a pocket knife. The fatal wound to her back suggested a prolonged attack, evidenced by wounds of varying depth and location on her body. Injuries on her hands indicated a struggle, with deep cuts on both sides as she tried to defend herself from the sharp knife. Despite her resistance, the assailant, aggressive and strong, overpowered her unexpectedly. Scratches on her back and torn clothing suggested a surprise attack from behind, knocking her down and repeatedly stabbing her. A footprint from a size 42 to 43 sneaker at the scene likely belonged to the attacker. Signs of an attempt to escape, crawl away, and hide were visible in the area, but unsuccessful. Traces of blood and remains of a struggle near a barbed wire fence showed her desperate efforts to evade the murderer. Her personal belongings, a phone, and house keys were found nearby. There were no wallet or other valuables on her, so the possibility of robbery was immediately dismissed. Lauren's phone was found to be broken. The last calls were made on the evening of April 27th. As no one had heard from her for over a day, forensic specialists conducted a thorough examination of the territory. They discovered an important detail a few meters from the crime scene. Among the branches lay a bloody pocket knife. Experts immediately suspected this to be the murder weapon. A detailed examination of the blade and handle revealed fingerprints and other DNA traces belonging to an unknown man. Hair and epithelium of the killer were also found at the crime scene. Lauren's body and all physical evidence were promptly sent for examination. Simultaneously, investigators reviewed surveillance camera footage. It was revealed that one of the cameras captured the moment Lauren entered the park at 10:52. She was walking alone, listening to music on her headphones. Nothing suspicious was noted. However, a minute later, the figure of a tall, thin man in dark clothes sprinted past the camera, trying to hide his face. Despite this, experts identified him as a young African-American man in a cap, matching the description of the individual found at the crime scene. Another camera positioned at the park's exit recorded the same man swiftly exiting around the corner at 10:59. He attempted to climb over the fence, but got snagged on his clothes, eventually jumping over and losing his cap. The suspect then disappeared in an unknown direction. These recordings provided the investigation with a crucial lead, offering a detailed description of the person to be located. It's notable that the unknown man's appearance in the park coincided with the time of Lauren's murder. The cameras captured the suspect immediately before and after the crime. A meticulous analysis of the footage showed that the suspect moved purposefully and quickly, appearing vigilant as if afraid of being detected. Secondly, he showed up in the park only 30 to 40 seconds after Lauren, clearly following her. Following the crime, he quickly ran away in the opposite direction from the park's entrance, climbing a fence to disappear rapidly. All of this supports the belief that the murder was planned in advance, indicating it may not have been his first crime. He acted swiftly and boldly, attempting to leave no trace. However, in the panic of the escape, he made some errors that led to him being captured partially on camera. The footage from the cameras was promptly shared with Lauren's relatives, but no one could identify him in the video. The shock and sorrow felt by everyone was palpable. Her relatives couldn't comprehend how someone could brutally take the life of their beloved, gentle girl. Lauren had no enemies, conflicts, valuables, or significant sums of money. Her lifestyle was not hazardous, dispelling notions of revenge or robbery. 1 week after the tragic event, the police held a press conference to share details about the evidence found. They asked the public for help in identifying the suspect. Lauren's father, with tears in his eyes, urged anyone with information to come forward. The family also offered a significant reward for any useful leads. The city was worthy Lauren's story, sparking a huge reaction. Social media was full of sharing information, search efforts, and volunteer work. At the same time, forensic investigations continued. DNA, fingerprints, and other biological evidence were carefully examined in the lab. Finally, experts struck gold. The suspect's genetic profile matched records in the police database. The system revealed the name, Zion William Teasley, a 22-year-old African-American with a history of criminality. Detectives swiftly delved into Zion's background, unearthing his challenging upbringing in a home marred by addiction and criminality since his youth. In 2020, he was convicted of a series of armed robberies. Zion spent almost a year in prison but was released early for good behavior. He was last arrested in January 2023 for a knife attack on a passerby. However, the victim then withdrew the statement, so Teasley got off with a suspended sentence. At the time of Lauren's murder, he was under police supervision and had to regularly check in at the precinct. The last such check took place on April 27th, the day before the tragedy in the park. With this new information, the detectives began to develop a plan to detain the suspect. They established round-the-clock surveillance on him and discovered that Zion was not working anywhere at that time, spending all his time at home and occasionally visiting some dubious individuals. Obtaining an arrest warrant, the capture group went to Zion Teasley's apartment. The door had to be broken down, but no one was inside. During the search, the police found a bucket of chlorine, gloves, and rags, indicating an attempt to destroy evidence, though he didn't have enough time for it. In Zion's room, they found a suitcase stuffed with clothes, a brand new passport in a different name, and bus tickets to Canada, suggesting a plan to flee the country. Investigators immediately suspected that Zion had found out about the search and was trying to evade justice. A large-scale special operation began with the focus on Zion Teasley being sent to all states. Border guards were alerted to apprehend the murder suspect. Patrols were deployed at railway stations, airports, and highways. Detectives traced the fugitive's phone calls and located him using signals from cell towers. Meanwhile, they also collected evidence, including witnesses who saw Zion Teasley following Lauren before her murder. A thorough investigation into Zion's history uncovered previous assaults on women, suggesting a history of violence. He was arrested for harassing a girl in a club. Prior to that, a girl he was dating wrote a statement accusing him of beating her. Although the case was closed due to lack of evidence, Zion was widely regarded as an extremely aggressive and unbalanced person who held contempt for women, considering them inferior. His social media posts were filled with derogatory language towards women, and there were also photos of knives resembling the murder weapon. Police suggested that Lauren might have been a random victim of Zion's violent tendencies. It was theorized that he spotted her on the street, stalked her, and then attacked her in a deserted place. Some speculated that he may have felt provoked by her attractiveness and apparent vulnerability, a common trigger for individuals with his mindset. Lauren's family, devastated by her senseless death, implored the public to eschew vigilante justice and allow the legal system to handle the case. After a 3-day search, Zion Teasley was apprehended in an abandoned garage on the city's outskirts. During his arrest, he resisted and injured a police officer. Subsequently, during questioning, he adamantly denied any involvement in the crime. However, when presented with surveillance footage from the park, he fell silent and requested legal representation. The prosecution swiftly charged Zion Teasley with intentional murder and kidnapping, citing substantial evidence such as video recordings, Lauren's belongings found in the garage, a knife, and DNA and fingerprints found at the crime scene. As a result, the court ordered that he be held in custody without the option for bail. The trial of Zion Teasley began on June 5, 2023, a highly publicized case in the state's history, capturing the attention of the entire nation. Journalists, activists, and concerned citizens gathered outside the courthouse, eager to observe the accused individual. Accompanied by tight security, Zion entered the courtroom in handcuffs, wearing an orange prison outfit, seemingly indifferent. Lauren's family openly displayed their emotions. Her mother wept continuously, while her father glared angrily at the defendant. Friends of the victim, holding her pictures, also attended the proceedings. The prosecutor argued that Zion Teasley was a dangerous and calculated killer who posed a significant danger to society. He emphasized the audacious nature of the crime and the strong evidence against the defendant, portraying Zion as a misogynistic psychopath who took pleasure in causing harm to women. In contrast, Zion's lawyer sought to prove his client's innocence, questioning the presented evidence and suggesting the involvement of another individual in Lauren's death. The defense attorney advised the jury to make their decision based on facts rather than emotions or public opinion, highlighting Zion's difficult upbringing and the harsh treatment he endured in his family. Zion William Teasley currently faces charges of first-degree murder. In December 2023, the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office pushed for the death penalty, the harshest punishment allowed by Arizona state law for such a serious crime. The Phoenix Police Department concluded their investigation into the case, with the suspect now awaiting trial. There is no information that would indicate that the attack on Lauren Ha was anything other than a random choice of a victim by the perpetrator. Zion Teasley himself does not admit his guilt in committing this brutal murder. He continues to be held in custody without the right to post bail. The trial of the accused is scheduled for October 2025. It is expected that this will be one of the most resonant trials in the history of the state of Arizona. The tragic death of Lauren Heike shook all of America and became a real shock for her family and friends. She, who loved life so much and believed in the goodness of people, became a victim of a cruel and senseless crime. This murder once again reminded society of the importance of public safety and timely response to alarming signals about the inadequate behavior of certain individuals. This story also showed how important the work of law enforcement agencies is, as they were able to promptly find and detain the suspect and gather the necessary evidence of his guilt. Ahead is the judicial review of this case, which should put the final point and determine the measure of responsibility of the murderer. Society hopes that justice will be fair and that the criminal will receive the most severe punishment. Most importantly, the memory of Lauren Heike should live in the hearts of all who knew and loved her. This girl will forever remain young, beautiful, kind, and sincere. Let her story be a warning to everyone. Value life, be careful, and do not be indifferent to those who are near. Maria was born on December 6, 1996, in the family of Clemens and Friederike Ladenberger. According to the German press, both her parents were lawyers. Moreover, her father was also a high-ranking official in the European Union. In 2016, Maria was a student at the medical faculty of the University of Freiburg. In her spare time, she worked part-time in one of the urban centers that provided assistance to immigrants. On the night of October 15th to 16th, 2016, Maria attended a party organized by the medical faculty. She had a good time with her friends, and when she started to get ready to go home, it was about 2:30 a.m. Maria lived on campus, about 3 miles from the university where the party was. After saying goodbye to her friends, she went outside and rode her bike towards the campus. It was at 2:37 a.m. At 8:20 a.m. on the same day, someone who was jogging along the river Dreisam saw a woman's body in the water near the shore. Eyewitnesses called the police and an ambulance. However, there was nothing the medics could do to help. They identified the victim as 19-year-old Maria Ladenberger. She never made it to her dorm. A jogger found her body about a mile away. During the forensic examination, the experts established that the cause of Maria's death was drowning. At the same time, someone also tried to strangle her with a scarf, which the police found at the scene. That scarf contained a sample of male DNA, apparently belonging to the perpetrator. The police also found out the probable motive for the attack on Maria. The forensic medical examination established that someone forced the girl into intimacy before her death. The police formed a special commission of 68 investigators to solve this case. In addition to the DNA on the scarf, the police found several black hairs with bleached ends, 7 inches long, in the bushes near the crime scene. Importantly, this strand of hair contained the roots, which allowed the authorities to obtain another sample of male DNA. This sample matched the one on the scarf used to strangle Maria. However, the police could not establish the identity of the person to whom the DNA samples belonged, since there was no information about him in the databases. On November 8th, the police offered a reward of €6,000 for information that could help solve this case. Thanks to several individuals, the reward amount soon increased to €35,000. The police questioned more than 1,000 people, including the ones who attended the party, which was the last for Maria. At the same time, more than 100 people voluntarily provided DNA samples for comparative analysis. Most of the people who provided their DNA were those who attended the party. Yet, none of these samples matched the DNA found at the crime scene. Residents of Freiburg were shocked after details of Maria's death appeared in the press. People bought up all the pepper sprays in the city as they understood that the criminal was still at large. In addition, cases of harassment of women have become more frequent in the city. A few days before Maria Ladenberger's death, several refugees harassed a young woman in the same area. Another similar incident occurred 2 weeks earlier. Self-defense courses have never been so in demand in Freiburg before. Many people went to local sports centers to learn how to defend themselves. Meanwhile, 25 additional officers started patrolling the city to increase security. People are afraid to go outside alone at night, Mayor Dieter Salomon said. We cannot put up with this situation. 25 additional officers may seem like a drop in the bucket, but for a city with a high crime rate, it was a signal that the authorities were finally interested in Freiburg's problems. The police checked all possible leads. However, the decisive moment in identifying the perpetrator was the hair and scarf found at the scene. Knowing that the man they were looking for had long black hair with bleached ends, the police started analyzing the recordings from many city cameras. Looking through the CCTV footage from the city tram, they saw a man with a similar hair color and length. The man had an undercut, short hair on the side and back, and longer hair on top. This recording was from the night of October 16th at 1:57 a.m., 40 minutes before Maria left the party. The suspect got on a tram near the university. After about 20 minutes, he got off at the final stop, which was less than a mile from the place where a jogger later found Maria's body. As the police reported, while on the tram, The suspect was bothering two girls, but they eventually managed to rid themselves of his attention. On December 3, 2016, almost 7 weeks after Maria's death, the police arrested a suspect, 17-year-old Hussein Kavari. Initially, the authorities considered him an immigrant who came to Germany from Afghanistan. Yet, during the investigation, it turned out that he was not 17 years old and that he was not a citizen of Afghanistan. Kavari entered Germany without an ID card in November 2015. When crossing the border, he said that he came from Afghanistan and that he was born in 1999. Hussein Kavari stated that he was 16 when he entered the country. He did not have any documents confirming or refuting this. Due to his stated age, Germany granted him asylum as an underage, unaccompanied refugee. They sent Kavari to live with a foster German family in a picturesque town near the Black Forest, where he went through a local school, learned German, and received government benefits. Such a trick with age fabrication turned out to be a common phenomenon, which at that time gave an advantage not only when applying for asylum, but also in case of breaking the laws. After all, the punishment for juvenile offenders is less severe. We'll return to the suspect's age later because it's just the tip of the iceberg in his biography. After the police arrested Kavari as the main suspect in the Maria Ladenberger case, his image appeared in the press. While the German media tried to hide his face, the TV channels and newspapers of other European countries did not do this, publishing a non-blurred picture of his face. The lawyer from Greece, Maria Eleni Nikopoulou, saw photos of the arrested young man in the media and recognized him. She defended him in court in the spring of 2013. At that time, he was charged and found guilty of a life-threatening attack on a young student on the island of Corfu, Greece. Kavari robbed a 20-year-old student and threw her over a cliff. The girl flew about 25 feet down and, by some miracle, survived, thanks to the bushes on which she fell. She spent 17 days in the hospital and underwent 3 surgeries. The police arrested Kavari, and when the girl recovered, she identified him as the man who attacked her. However, Kavari himself did not understand the reason for his arrest, stating that she was just a woman when talking to the police. The court sentenced a young asylum seeker to 10 years in prison for theft and attempted life deprivation. What's important here is that during the trial, he claimed that he came from Iran and that he was born in 1996. But when he entered Germany, he claimed to have been born in 1999. So here's the question. How did Hussein Kavari get to Germany in 2015 if he was sentenced to 10 years in prison in Greece in 2014? And here's the answer. He was released on parole in October 2015 due to prison overcrowding in Greece. He'd violated his probation by not regularly reporting to a police station, coming there only once. They put him on the wanted list, but it only applied to Greece. At that time, the borders were open, and Kavari, along with thousands of other refugees, went to Germany, where he fabricated his age to impersonate an underage, unaccompanied asylum seeker. After Kavari was arrested as a suspect in the Maria Ladenberger case, his fingerprints were compared with fingerprints from the crime scene in Greece. This confirmed that he was the same person who had attacked the woman in Corfu. After learning all this, Germany had many questions for the Greek authorities. Since the police did not initiate a search for Kavari via Interpol, he entered Germany unhindered. Germany's Federal Minister of the Interior, Thomas de Maizière, called it gross negligence and was outraged that Greece had not shared information about this refugee. The suspect would have been caught at the border and checked by the German security authorities if we had received information from Greece. All this happened in a reprehensible way. We will have to talk to the Greeks about this process, Maizière said. While the police in Germany and Greece were trying to sort things out among themselves, ordinary residents of Germany, including the ones from Freiburg, demanded the authorities to take action against uncontrolled immigration. In response to the discontent of residents, Freiburg's Mayor Dieter Salomon stated they shouldn't use Kavari's origin as a case against immigration policy. He proposed to treat it as a separate incident. At the same time, the Alternative for Germany party called Maria Ladenberger a victim of Angela Merkel's welcome culture. Unfortunately, Maria Ladenberger's story was not the only one of its kind. On December 27, 2017, in Kandel, a refugee from Afghanistan, 15-year-old Abdul Dawodzai attacked his classmate, 15-year-old Mia Valentine, with a knife in broad daylight. The motive for the attack was that Mia stopped talking with him. As a result, she died in the hospital, and police arrested Dawodzai. The girl's parents doubted that Dawodzai was 15 years old and demanded to find out his age. They determined his age by X-rays of his arm, collarbone, and teeth. The expert concluded that Dawodzai was at least 17 years old and most likely around 20. Still, they tried him as a minor, meaning the maximum penalty was 10 years in prison. On September 3, 2018, the court sentenced him to 8.5 years behind bars, which provoked the anger not only of the girl's parents, but also of the entire society. It is important to note that a year after his conviction, Dawodzai was found dead in his prison cell. He had committed self-harm, and doctors had not had time to treat him. On March 12, 2018, an underage unaccompanied refugee from Afghanistan, Ahmad, attacked 17-year-old Mireille Bold in her apartment in Flensburg. Mireille and Ahmad dated for 2 years, but when the guy started controlling her every move, the girl broke up with him and started a relationship with another guy. As a result, she died from 14 stab wounds. At the trial, Ahmad claimed that he was 17 years old at the time of the attack, and that they should try him as a minor, which implied a maximum sentence of 10 years. But the examination showed that Ahmad was not 17 years old, as he claimed, but about 29. The judge agreed with the examination results, deciding to try Ahmad as an adult. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment. However, under certain conditions, the German law on life imprisonment provides for the right to early release after 15 years. Authorities also urged not to forget that exactly the same crimes are committed by Germans. When the police said that the perpetrator was a refugee, the tension in society started to grow. Maria's parents, Friederike and Clemens Ladenberger, refrained from condemning speeches. Instead, they founded the Maria Ladenberger Foundation in memory of their daughter. This foundation brought them a civic award of 20,000 euros from the Federal Association of German Newspaper Publishers in Berlin. If at some point my children or grandchildren ask me what I did to help the world develop in the direction that I thought was right, I at least want to say that I took advantage of the opportunities I had. This quote from Maria served as the basis for creating this foundation. It supports students of the University of Freiburg in difficult life situations. For example, first-year students who do not have enough financial resources to study, especially refugee students. Friederike Ladenberger said she wants people to remember her daughter's name not only because of a terrible act, but also because of her life. Clemens Ladenberger stated, "The crime against Maria has deeply shocked people in Germany. Together with other events, it brought several political issues to public discussion. As Maria's parents, we do not want acts of hatred or cold-blooded contempt in our society to cause hatred and incitement to others. Otherwise, the destructive spiral threatens to undermine the foundations of social coexistence." As parents, they considered expressing their Christian beliefs, but decided not to speak publicly. We believe that our restraint, our interest in an objective discussion of these complex political issues, ultimately serves us well. By creating the foundation, they wanted to encourage people to use their educational opportunities and individuality to find their place in society. When our life became full of darkness, pain, and confusion, a deep sense of gratitude settled in us. "Thanks for the gift, for our Maria. This attitude helps to control fate," said Friederike Ladenberger. "We felt like God had given us the strength to cope with this fate. He is with us. He accompanies us. We realized that we now have a new life task, to cope with the violent death of our daughter, and we will cope. We've been saying this to each other since the beginning, and we keep saying it now. And the feeling of gratitude that we talked about helps us to prevent all other feelings from arising so strongly that they take over, said Clemens Laudenberger. Now, let's get back to Maria's case. In addition to DNA evidence, the police now had Hussein Kavari's confession. The trial began in September 2017. Kavari admitted that he forced Maria into intimacy and took her life. Moreover, the man also confessed that he lied about his age. He did not tell the court how old he was, but only confirmed that he was of legal age. While under oath, the forensic dentist said the defendant was probably between 22 and 29 years old. About 8 months before the attack on Maria Laudenberger, Kavari had his tooth extracted during a routine dental procedure. He kept it as a souvenir that the police found while searching his apartment. According to the expert, one can establish the person's age by the annual rings in the tooth's root. That's how the forensic dentist knew Hussein Kavari's age ranged from 22 to 29 years old. The method is safe and gives accurate results. X-ray examinations, for example of wrist bones often used to diagnose aging, are considered relatively imprecise. Therefore, Senior Prosecutor Eckhart Berger called the dental examination crucial evidence in establishing the defendant's age. Kavari claimed that his father died many years ago in Afghanistan. However, the police established that his father was alive and lived in Iran. The court got a clearer picture of Kavari's age after the prosecutor contacted his father by phone. According to the father, his son was born in Iran on January 29, 1984, which means he was 32 years old at the time of Maria's death. As a result, they tried him as an adult. During the trial, he said that a couple of hours before the attack, he and his friends had consumed a large amount of alcohol and took some prohibited substances. After parting with his friends, he got on a tram and drove to the area where he later attacked Maria. In her spare time, Maria worked part-time at the Immigrant Assistance Center in Freiburg. She tried to help people who found themselves in a difficult life situation. By some evil fate, she died at the hands of one of these people. As the crime sparked public anger and disgust, social media users posted sarcastic thank you messages to Chancellor Angela Merkel over her liberal policy that brought more than 1 million refugees and immigrants to the country. During the trial, prosecutor Eckhart Berger had reminded the 2 jurors sitting alongside 3 judges that on trial is a criminal offender and not Germany's refugee policy. Kavari sobbed in court as he read out a statement of apology to the victim's family. He claimed he had nightmares about Maria's death every day. "I beg your pardon. I want to apologize to the family of Maria. I wish I could undo it," he said. "What I have done, I am sad for from the bottom of my heart. I live with the agony of what I did, and this torment destroys my life by and by." At the trial, Hussein Kavari told everyone about his challenging fate. He described his journey from Iran to Turkey, Turkey to Greece, and finally through Serbia and Slovenia to Germany. He spoke about life among the ruins, eating from garbage in Greece, theft, and the use of illegal substances and alcohol while staying in a foster family in Germany as an underage refugee. In court, he stated that he suffers from psychological conditions and has nightmares and frequent insomnia. Among other things, his stress was due to worries about his homeland. "I have many problems. I have a lot of problems," Kavari said. During his testimony, he described the night he took Maria Laudenberger's life. According to him, a few hours before the crime, he and his friends drank 2 bottles of vodka. Then he drank beer and wine alone. He also smoked several cigarettes and used illegal substances. He then got on a tram near the future crime scene. He bothered other girls on the tram, and when he reached the final stop, he stole a bicycle there. However, he fell off the bike because he was too drunk. When he saw Maria, he pushed her off the bike and put his hand over her mouth. She started screaming, and he decided to strangle her with a scarf, which made her lose consciousness. According to Kavari, he noticed that Maria Laudenberger was a beautiful girl and decided to take advantage of the fact that she was unconscious. Then he carried Maria into the water, where she drowned. Authorities believed that Cavari moved Maria into the water to destroy the evidence left on her body. Cavari claimed that he was too drunk and had no control over his actions. He said he didn't want it to end the way it ended. Prosecutors disputed his version of events and alleged his actions were premeditated. A psychiatric expert testified that he believed the remorse Cavari displayed was fake, telling the court that the defendant exhibited a great and persistent readiness for violence and warned there was a high risk of him reoffending. Cavari harbored an interest in aggressive sexual practices and a hostile attitude towards women, he said. Moreover, he does not show remorse and compassion for the suffering of others. Maria's parents decided not to attend the trial. A lawyer they hired represented their interests. Maria's father, Clemens Laudenberger, said, "We wanted the most constructive, objective justice possible, but without additional media hype, political statements, and impact on the course of the trial due to emotional statements from the victims, that is, from us." When asked by a journalist if they had any desire to meet face-to-face with the criminal, Maria's father replied, "We kept this question open. In any case, it was unclear from the very beginning whether we would stay away from the process from beginning to end. But during the discussion, we asked each other whether Maria wanted us to be there, and we concluded she does not want that. Moreover, based on the criminal's characteristics and behavior in court, we increasingly believed we would not achieve anything by this confrontation. We knew it would not help us." On September 22, 2018, Hussein Cavari was found guilty. Presiding Judge Catherine Schenk condemned the extreme lack of empathy of Cavari, who was handcuffed and wearing a black hooded jumper, before reading out the verdict and sentence, which many in the courtroom greeted with applause. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment. As mentioned earlier, the German law on life imprisonment provides for the right to early release after 15 years if the parole board concludes that the convict does not pose a danger to society. However, during sentencing, the judge noted the extreme severity of Hussein Cavari's guilt. It means his early release from prison after 15 years is legally possible, but practically unrealistic. Sadistic serial killer Michael Madison. 2 weeks shy of Halloween 1977, Michael Madison was born on October 15th in Cleveland, Ohio. His parents, Diane Madison and John Baldwin, accidentally got pregnant and didn't have much of a relationship at the time of his birth. John Baldwin left Diane to care for their young son and denied being Michael's father. Growing up, Diane's mother had been a sex worker and heroin addict. She grew up in a household full of neglect. Diane's upbringing left her unprepared to care for her young son independently. Shortly after giving birth to her son, Michael, social workers were brought into the home. Diane was allowing her constant stream of boyfriends to punish Michael. When Michael was 2, Diane was found to have forcefully stuffed food down Michael's throat. As a result, the toddler began vomiting uncontrollably. Unsure of what to do, Diane put her screaming son into a tub full of hot water. This caused Michael to cry more. Growing frustrated with her young son, Diane took him out of the bath and beat him with an extension cord. I hear later, one of Diane's many boyfriends beat Michael so severely with a bout that the young boy vomited and needed to be hospitalized. In another horrific incident, Michael was beaten so severely by another one of Diane's boyfriends that he lost hearing in one of his ears. After years of abuse, Michael was sent to live with his grandmother, who was still a heroin addict and sex worker. But unfortunately, Michael's horrific childhood wouldn't change. Michael continued to be hospitalized for reasons such as dehydration. The social workers involved in Michael's case would note that he and his half-brother were covered in scratches and bruises. Before Michael reached high school, he had become a familiar face to law enforcement. On several occasions, the teenager had been found using women. In high school, he received a delinquent charge for inappropriately touching another classmate. The crimes Michael committed as a teenager were nothing like the ones he would go on to commit as an adult. In July 2013, the family of 38-year-old Angela Deskins reported her missing after they hadn't heard from her since June. Deskins was known for disappearing from time to time, so the family didn't think much of it. A month after she went missing, her body was discovered wrapped in electrical cords with a belt around her neck. 28-year-old Shadisha Sheely was reported missing in September 2012 when she didn't show up at her mother's house. Sheely, along with her 12-year-old daughter, were living with extended family at the time, and Sheely was supposed to stop by her mother's house to borrow some money, but she never showed. Her body was found in July 2013 inside a plastic garbage bag. After returning home from her job at an elementary school, 18-year-old Sherelda Terry disappeared. Her body was also found inside a black trash bag. On July 19, 2013, Michael's neighbors called the police to report a horrible smell coming from a garage near his second-floor apartment building. Inside the garage, the police discovered the decomposing body of a woman. During the police search of the surrounding area, including other vacant homes and backyards, the police found the bodies of 2 more women. Each was wrapped in plastic bags and located approximately 200 yards apart. The police were granted a search warrant for Michael's home, and inside they found further evidence of decomposition. Now the search was on to find where Michael Madison was. The police tracked him down to his mother's house. When they arrived, Michael refused to come out, resulting in a several-hour-long standoff between him and the police before he finally agreed to come out and was taken into police custody. Michael never once showed remorse to the victims' families during the trial. Michael laughed, smiled, and taunted the families. During Sherelda Terry's father's victim impact statement, Michael smiled at the distraught father. This set Terry's father off, and he tried to attack Michael but was quickly stopped. Michael didn't stop smiling once during the altercation. The jury deliberated less than a day before Michael Madison was found guilty of all 3 murders. He was also found guilty of 3 counts of kidnapping, 3 counts of gross abuse of a corpse, 1 count of rape, and 1 count of weapons possession by an ex-convict. On May 20, 2016, Michael was sentenced to death, a sentence he would attempt to appeal a month later. On July 21, 2020, the Ohio Supreme Court voted unanimously to uphold the death sentence for Michael Madison. Killer Ronald O'Brien. Children are cautioned from an early age not to accept candy from strangers. While this golden rule is strictly enforced by vigilant parents throughout the year, on Halloween night, they throw caution to the wind and allow their little ones to go door to door asking for treats. In most instances, their request is granted without worry. Even so, once in a while, the monsters that lurk in the shadows take advantage of the occasion, resulting in dire consequences for the most innocent among us. In 1974, a boy in Pasadena, Texas fell victim to just such a predator when he became violently ill after indulging in a treat from his Halloween bag. After the concerned parent, his father had stayed by his side during the hour-long ordeal, offering comfort to the youngster as he convulsed on the bathroom floor. Only 8 years old at the time, Timothy O'Brien died later that night on his way to the hospital. In a shocking turn of events, an autopsy revealed that he had ingested enough potassium cyanide to kill 2 grown men. As difficult as it was to believe, all signs pointed to the fact that someone had deliberately laced candy with a colorless compound before randomly handing it out to unsuspecting children. Investigators were convinced that a cold-blooded killer was hiding somewhere in the suburbs of Houston, and they intended to find him. With no suspects in mind and little evidence to go on, detectives theorized that an unscrupulous person who was angry at the world in general had decided to take the life of a complete stranger, a child no less, as a way of getting back at society. To make a difficult situation even worse, there was no telling how many children had received the tainted sweets. Although authorities had put out an emergency news bulletin requesting that all Halloween candy be brought to the police station for inspection, they feared that there would be other victims before all was said and done. While they faced an uphill battle, to be sure, investigators did have a few things working in their favor. For one, it had been raining heavily on the evening of Trick or Treat, which had limited the number of houses that Timothy and his sister Elizabeth had visited. More importantly, a chemical analysis of the contents of the boy's treat bag had enabled them to pinpoint the carrier of the poison. Lab tests revealed that the killer's lethal weapon of choice had been the sweet and sour powder contained inside of a straw-shaped pixie sticks. After meeting with the residents of the houses where the O'Brien children were known to have gotten candy, detectives were confident that none of them had given out pixie sticks. However, during the course of their interviews, they learned that someone had been witnessed doling out that particular treat and that someone had been Timothy's father, Ronald O'Brien. When he was brought in for questioning, O'Brien claimed that a man he had never seen before had emerged from a darkened home and given him several pixie sticks to hand out on his behalf. He added that, after consuming a small amount of the sugary powder, Timothy had complained that it tasted funny. Instead of telling him to throw it out, he had given his son the soft drink to help wash it down. Under the pretense of helping police solve the case, he had readily provided them with the address of a house where the exchange had taken place. Upon speaking with the mystery man, who turned out to be an air traffic controller named Claudine Melvin, officers learned that he had an alibi for the night in question. According to him, he had been at work and had not returned home until well after midnight. When they visited his place of employment, his supervisor confirmed his story and had the paperwork to prove it. In a stunning show of support, 200 of Melvin's coworkers came forward to vouch for his character. Realizing that they had been duped, investigators quickly concluded that this man was not their killer, something that Ronald O'Brien had known all along. A bit of digging into his past uncovered that Ronald O'Brien, who had trained as an optician, was not nearly as respectable as he wanted others to believe. I'm not content who couldn't hold a job, he was drowning in a sea of debt. Not above taking what he wanted, he had been accused of stealing on numerous occasions, usually by former employers. While being shiftless and prone to theft doesn't necessarily mean that someone is capable of murder, the fact that O'Brien had taken out hefty life insurance policies, not one but three, on his children in the months prior to his son's untimely death moved him to the top of the list of suspects. Another nail in O'Brien's self-constructed coffin came when it was discovered that he had phoned the insurance company on the morning after his son's death, inquiring about a payout. As the 8-year-old's body lay in the icy morgue, his father's only concern had been how quickly the money he had coming would change hands. On November 5, 1974, less than a week after Timothy was poisoned, Ronald O'Brien was taken into custody and formally charged with 1 count of murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. To no one's surprise, he pleaded not guilty across the board. He would steadfastly maintain his innocence throughout the trial, despite the damning evidence against him. During the proceedings, a parade of witnesses testified that O'Brien had become fixated on the properties of cyanide in the months leading up to his son's murder. His obsession led him to brazenly ask friends and family alike if they knew where he could purchase the deadly poison. He would also inquire of them if they had any idea how much of the substance it would take to kill a person. In June of 1975, 8 months after little Timothy O'Brien had been laid to rest, his father was convicted of his murder. He was also found guilty in the attempted poisonings of the other 4 children, none of whom had ingested the legal powder. For his crimes, Ronald O'Brien, whom the press had dubbed the Candyman, was condemned to the electric chair. Down the road, as alternative methods of execution were introduced, his punishment was amended to a more humane death by lethal injection. It had taken the jury just over an hour to decide the fate of the man who had so callously plotted and carried out the murder of someone who had trusted him implicitly. Once the verdict was in, the waiting game began. As it happened, 9 years would pass, more time than Timothy had spent on this earth, before his killer would face final justice. During his time on death row, O'Brien was reviled by his fellow inmates who, despite their own misdeeds, considered him to be lower than a snake's belly. Their hatred of the child killer ran so deep that they had thrown a party on the day of his demise to let him know that he would not be missed. After several stays of execution, O'Brien was put to death on March 31, 1984, at the age of 39. When asked if he had any last words, he had taken the opportunity to rail against the system that had allowed him to come to such an end. When his death was announced over the loudspeaker, hundreds of people who had gathered outside the prison to celebrate the occasion had shouted trick or treat while throwing handfuls of candy in the air in remembrance of Timothy, a young boy who had paid the ultimate price for his father's greed. Todd Allen Reed, the Forest Park killer. The bodies of 3 women were found in the same stretch of parkland, all within a month of each other. It was not long before police had their name. But is he responsible for more than the 3 murders they convicted him for? 32-year-old Todd Allen Reed was already a registered sex offender when he strangled to death at least 3 women before dunking their naked bodies in Forest Park, a heavily wooded area just west of Portland, Oregon. From 1992 to 1995, he had served a measly 2.5 years of a 12-year sentence for the sexual assault of Shelley Harding, who was 7 months pregnant at the time of his cowardly attack. She had been walking home from work when he approached her and forced her into his car at knife point. Reed was involved in and fled the scene of a minor crash with another vehicle on his way to the secluded spot where he sexually assaulted Shelley. After he had assaulted her, he attempted to strangle her with a seatbelt and began to cry. Shelley was strong and she was calm. She had been talking to Reed constantly, like he was a friend almost, building a rapport. Whilst doing so, she made sure to leave as much physical evidence as she could, touching every surface to leave as many of her prints as possible. Whatever this monster was going to do to her, she wasn't going to make it easy for him to get away with. When Reed broke down, she used this to her advantage, and her pleas to be let go and her promises that she would not tell anyone worked. Reed let her go. Not only did Shelley report her abduction and assault, the 2 men that had been in the car that Reed had crashed into also reported the hit and run. They even had his license plate. Reed pleaded no contest and was handed the 12-year sentence. He was registered as a sex offender and, crucially, his DNA was taken and stored in the state crime lab. This would be the golden ticket police needed to catch the Forest Park serial killer 7 years later. Reed was released early as he had built up sentence-reducing credits, half of which were for good behavior. At roughly 8 miles long and 5,100 acres, Forest Park is one of the largest urban forest reserves in the USA, ranked 19th to be more precise. It is not easy to wander from the 70 miles of trails due to the park's dense vegetation. To highlight just how secluded this park can get once you're off trail, in 2004, a 53-year-old man called Frank and his 12-year-old daughter Ruth were discovered to be living off-grid in the park. They had been there for 4 years, completely undetected. On May 7, 1999, a couple walking their dog on one of the park's more remote trails would come across the body of 28-year-old Willa Faye Muller. She was naked and face down, entangled in thick blackberry brambles. She had been strangled, and it was determined that her body had been there for around 2 months. Police would find a used condom merely 28 feet from her body. They were able to extract DNA from this vital piece of evidence. The next day, May 8th, police themselves would discover a second body whilst they were searching the immediate area. The body of 26-year-old Stephanie Lynn Muscle was found around a quarter of a mile away from where Lilla had been discovered. She too was found naked and had been strangled. Tests would determine she had been left there less than a week before she was found. They would also recover traces of DNA on her thighs. A group of hikers would find the third body, that of 18-year-old Alexandria Eisen, in the early evening of June 2nd. Alexandria had been reported missing sometime in May. Police were unable to reach her body until the next day. Due to the location, she'd been dumped down an extremely steep slope just off of a deer path. She was found naked, and she too had been strangled. Her body was around 1/4 of a mile away from Lilla and Stephanie's. After the discovery of Alexandria's body, Police Chief Charles Moves admitted that investigators had concluded they were looking for a serial killer due to the similarities of the crimes. Physically, all 3 women resembled each other, but they also had very similar life experiences. They were all homeless at the time of their deaths and had cocaine and heroin addictions, although Stephanie had just completed a detox program before her murder. Lilla and Alexandria had been at some point engaged in prostitution to pay for these addictions. All 3 women were known to frequent West Burnside Street. It's also been claimed that Lilla and Stephanie knew each other, although this has not been proven either way. It was determined that all 3 of the women had been murdered elsewhere and their bodies were taken to Forest Park afterwards. Toxicology all showed that they had taken heroin sometime before their deaths. The police response was immediate and it was impressive. A specialist task force consisting of 16 individuals was formed, and they set about scouting bars, reaching out and offering protection to the community being targeted, and 30 additional beds were made available for homeless women during the investigation. Although residents were not happy about the lack of information they were receiving, the police kept their investigation tightly under wraps. Such was their determination to catch this killer. The task force would use the physical similarities of the three women to their advantage. A female officer of a similar appearance posed as a prostitute on West Burnside Street to see if they could reel the killer in. And sure enough, Reed took the bait. On the July 7th, the same day a vigil was being held for Lila, Stephanie, and Alexandria, Reed approached the undercover officer, and it was not long before his suspicious behavior flagged him to police. At about 5:20 a.m., he was approached by a member of the lookout team, Sergeant John Botchlet. Reed readily admitted that he was a sex offender and agreed to a search of his vehicle. They found an unused condom, a book entitled A Killing Gift about a woman who can kill men by merely looking at them, and some yellow strapping. There was nothing incriminating to be found, and the police had to let him go. He was not off the hook, however, far from it. Another lookout that night, Detective Sergeant Dave Schlegel, recognized him from the 1992 sexual assault case. He had in fact been the arresting officer. Police began 24-hour surveillance of Reed, both at his home and at his place of work. At least once during this surveillance, he was observed driving in circles around West Burnside and Sandy Boulevard. The police swab results came back and confirmed that the DNA from the condom at the mower crime scene and the DNA found on Stephanie's thighs matched the DNA that was on file for Todd Allen Reed. At around 7:30 p.m. on July 18th, after Reed had left for work, police executed a search warrant at his address, where he lived with his girlfriend. Once the police had left the premises, his girlfriend phoned him to let him know the police had been there. He attempted to make a getaway in the middle of his shift, but it was too late. The police had already arrived. At 11:30 p.m. on July 18th, 11 days after police had questioned him and only 1.5 months after the task force was set up, Reed was arrested outside of Renella Produce, the warehouse where he worked night shifts, unloading the delivery trucks. On July 27th, he was indicted on 7 criminal counts in relation to 3 homicides. It emerged that Reed, who had been ordered to serve 8 years post-prison supervision and actually been kicked out of a sex offender treatment program 2 weeks before his arrest for failure to attend. On February 23, 2001, he pleaded guilty and received 3 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. Reed had been facing the death penalty, but his plea deal took this off of the table. Reed is also the prime suspect in 2, possibly 3, other murders in the Portland area. The cases being referred to by Reed are the 1987 cold case murders of 15-year-old Jennifer Lyncher and 12-year-old Mindy Colleen Thomas, and the 1999 disappearance of 19-year-old Amma the Signs. In regards to the murders, Gresham Police Sergeant David Lerwick has been quoted as saying, "Always suspect that he was the person who killed both those girls. We didn't have enough evidence to convict him." Jennifer had gone missing on July 3rd, 1987, and her skeletal remains was found on July 8th, 1988. Mingy went missing from the apartment complex where she lived on August 3rd, 1987, and her body was discovered on October 4th, 1988. Both of the children had been strangled and dumped in wooded areas on the eastern side of Gresham, about 3 miles apart, and they were both last seen in the company of Gail Bennett, Reed's then girlfriend and later wife. They married in 1988 and divorced in 1997. Gresham police said Bennett, who has a police record of her own, might have information about the killings but has been uncooperative. Bennett has denied any knowledge. At the time, police were operating under the assumption that they had both been killed by the same man, and that this man was known to them. They had questioned Reed at the time of the investigation due to the fact they had both been seen with Gail, but he was never charged or arrested. Police renewed efforts to solve the Gresham cases after his arrest in the Portland killings, but attempts to compare DNA from the old crimes with Reed's DNA have been inconclusive. Amma the witnessing on June 30th, 1999, and has not been seen since. She was working as a prostitute at the time of her disappearance, and it has been claimed she knew / was friends with Alexandria Eisen. No charges have been brought forward in her case, although it is impossible to downplay the likely and they already had something to do with Amitha's disappearance. As of June 2020, what prison Reed is in is not known, and as of June 2021, he was no longer listed as an inmate and may be dead.